Meet Wu Ling, who died of pure embarrassment after accidentally emailing his browser history to his entire office, and woke up in a different world. He trained for 20,000 years but still thinks he's a useless F-rank weakling. He treats SS-rank apocalyptic monsters like free groceries for dinner. He joins the elite academy thinking he's immortal. The invincible instructor tells him to punch with full force. He taps him lightly and launches the teacher into orbit. Now the S-rank Ice Queen is obsessed with him, but he's too shy to notice she's simping. If you want to know why a regular guy is this strong, we have to go back 20,000 years. His name is Wu Ling. Back in school, he was picked on because of his weight. His peers treated him like a target for practice, but that actually gave him the motivation to study harder. He always thought that if he showed everyone his true intelligence, they would finally respect him. He worked day and night like crazy, but in the end, he ended up with a score of 0. After graduating, he didn't have many options, so he used his physical size to get a job as a trainer at a gym. He ended up signing a contract after only looking at the cover because the deal seemed too good to be true. It turned out to be a 15-year long-term agreement where he was constantly mistreated. If things didn't change, he had another 951 months of this hardship ahead of him. On top of the physical strain, he was forced to finish paperwork for a department he didn't even work for. During all this, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. He suffered a health crisis from overworking and staying up too late. The young man tried to call for help, but his luck was terrible. His phone, which worked fine the day before, was disconnected because of unpaid bills. He figured his time was up. He decided that before he passed away, he wanted to clear his search history. He was determined not to be the same person in his next life. After making sure he deleted everything, he felt he could go peacefully, but his bad luck followed him to the very end. Instead of hitting the delete button, he accidentally hit send to all. On the other hand, his boss received the message. Surprised by how fast the work was finished, the boss shared the files with all the shareholders during an important meeting. Let's just say the meeting turned into something very inappropriate for the office. As for Ling, he was reborn as the son of a leader in a struggling sect. Fast forward 20,000 years later in the 9 continents. The mountains were covered in clouds, looking like a dream. In this beautiful place, a man and a woman were walking together. The woman, Xiaoyu of the Fox clan, spoke to him in a sweet voice. She had long golden hair and braids, and asked why he was still hanging out in the back mountains when they had agreed to travel the world. The young man, with muscles rippling, lifted a giant boulder with one hand. He noted that without realizing it, he had been training there for 20,000 years. He told Xiaoyu that the rock was actually much larger than it looked compared to them. He calmly said that he was still just a regular person with a little bit of strength, and leaving the mountain would only lead to trouble. Xiaoyu couldn't believe what she was seeing. She asked what kind of ordinary person could lift a mountain. Ling tossed the mountain behind him like it was nothing. He realized he really had been reborn. When the mountain hit the ground, it caused a massive tremor that sent Xiaoyu flying into the air. He stood there calmly and mentioned that even though he was a young master of a sect, he didn't feel safe. To avoid being chased by rival groups, he stayed hidden in the mountains. He gently patted Xiaoyu's head and said it was time to go back, which made her blush. He thought to himself that if he hadn't saved this little fox to keep him company, he would have gone crazy from boredom. He told Xiaoyu she was beautiful and could catch anyone's eye, making her blush even more. Because of the trauma from his past life and being hunted in this one, he spent every single day for 20,000 years training hard. He remembered being chased by wild animals and enduring intense workouts. It took him a long time to realize he had been transported into a fantasy world. He was confused by his new name, Volcan, but he kept focusing on his physical training since everything else felt difficult. Suddenly, a giant green serpent with red eyes lunged at them. Ling stayed still for a moment, then jumped and delivered a powerful kick to the creature's head. He followed up by breaking a boulder and letting the pieces fall on the serpent. He sighed as the dust settled. He looked at Xiaoyu, who was looking at him with total admiration. He pointed at the serpent and said they were having meat for dinner. Xiaoyu was a bit scared of his strength, but mostly impressed. She nodded happily. By midday, the sun was shining through the trees. Xiaoyu leaned against the creature's remains, her heart fluttering. She was amazed that he took down such a powerful creature with just one punch. While they were eating, a loud, angry voice came from the sky. A man on a flying sword looked down at them and called Ling a thief. He claimed Ling stole the creature he had almost finished off. This was Chunhuo from a rival sect. Ling got flustered and told the man he didn't do it on purpose. He wasn't a good liar and ended up apologizing while ducking his head. Chunhuo looked at them and thought Ling was just a regular guy with no special powers. He attacked with his sword, but Ling caught it with his bare hands. Chunhuo fell to the ground in shock. Ling bowed and apologized again, saying he was sorry for blocking the attack even though the man was trying to finish him. Xiaoyu was confused by how polite he was being to someone trying to hurt them. Chunhuo didn't believe a mortal could block his sword. He accused Xiaoyu of helping him secretly. She told him that if she had actually stepped in, he wouldn't be standing there anymore. Chunho got angry and used a special technique to send 3 swords at them. Ling caught all 3 easily. Once again, Ling bowed and asked the man to leave Xiaoyu out of it, even if he wanted to finish him. Xiaoyu felt touched that he was protecting her. Chunho, losing his mind, launched dozens of swords at once. Ling stayed calm and caught every single one in a split second. He apologized again for blocking them. Xiaoyu thought he was being silly but cute. Chunho realized he was totally outclassed. He suddenly changed his tone, acting very respectful and calling Ling a senior. He asked for his swords back so he could leave. Ling, who can't say no to anyone, threw the swords back. However, he used way too much power and accidentally destroyed a huge section of the forest. Chunho stood there in total shock, his clothes torn and looking pathetic. Ling didn't stay to chat. He put the meat on his shoulder and told Xiaoyu they had to go make dinner for his father. Before leaving, Xiaoyu looked back at Chunho with a cold stare. She warned him not to tell anyone about what happened. Terrified, Chunho nodded quickly. Once they were gone, Chunho collapsed in fear, wondering who they really were. But then a mean look crossed his face. He planned to tell a powerful elder from his group about them to get his revenge. On the way back, Xiaoyu praised Ling for defeating a high-level cultivator. He insisted he was just a regular guy and that the man must have been going easy on him. Xiaoyu disagreed, saying the guy definitely wanted to finish him off. Ling just said that since he has no special powers, he has to train his body even harder. They eventually reached a dark cave filled with old remains. Some scary-looking figures appeared and told them to leave. But when Ling said he brought meat, they immediately became friendly and excited. Ling realized that even though these guys looked intimidating, they were actually like kind uncles to him. Even so, the group leader just turned his face away, looking unhappy with the situation. Right then, Woody, the sect leader, asked if the boy still saw him as a father, pointing out that he hadn't seen him in 3 hours. The son explained himself, saying that he got held up while hunting and preparing the food. However, his father shot back that he already knew what was happening outside. Then, the older man accused the girl of trying to convince Ling to go down the mountain again, but the young man denied that was true. The leader yelled in anger, completely shutting down the request. This sudden outburst left both the son and Xiaoyu shocked. Even though he had been sealed away for 20,000 years, Wudi claimed he still remembered how tricky the righteous sect could be. With that, he asked if the boy wanted to see his own father have to lay him to rest, which made the young man say sorry. However, Ling hesitated for a moment before he kept talking. Pretty soon, he lost his cool, saying he had been hearing the same excuses for 20,000 years. The son's attitude left the man totally speechless. Still, Ling stated that he didn't want to stay in the forest anymore, even if it meant being hunted or taken down. The other members called him naive, reminding him that he was the last of the family and that leaving would be like throwing his life away. Just then, Xiaoyu cut in to reveal that they had run into a righteous cultivator, and she mentioned that her partner had defeated him with just one punch. Ling tried to claim it was only a misunderstanding though. Hearing that, Wudi wondered silently if the boy had really gotten that strong, but he still shouted that Ling was just a regular person with no spiritual roots. Next, he asked how his son would handle stronger opponents, which made the girl worry. So the father warned him not to think he was unbeatable just because he had taken down a few enemies. But the young man replied that he never said he was unbeatable and that he wasn't interested in stuff like that. He revealed that his real goal was to break the seal and rescue them, which was something he could never do while staying in the forest. Then Wudi turned to the others and asked if they had told his son about that, but they all said they hadn't. At that moment, the boy remembered how his father had always tried to protect him, even while he was sealed away. Now that they were grown, he declared it was his turn to protect the older man. Right then, Xiaoyu interrupted to remind them of something they had forgotten. She explained that since her friend had no dark aura, his identity wouldn't be discovered, and the others agreed with her. Even so, Wudi refused to take the risk because getting stronger might release his aura and destroy him. Then the son turned to leave, asking them not to blame him for a choice he had already made. As soon as he turned his back, he heard his father shout for him to stop. Right after that, an object was thrown toward him. He caught it in midair while Xiaoyu also took a look at the item. Confused, the young man asked what the object in his hands was. The older man explained that it was the pass for the Swantian Academy exam and suggested he go there first. Immediately, the group got excited at the news, since the academy was famous for training high-level cultivators. Xiaoyu questioned the decision, but Wudi argued that the most dangerous place was actually the safest one. With that, the young man realized he would find tons of training paths there and might even discover one for himself. Next, he started packing his stuff into a big bundle. Soon, he showed up ready to leave with a huge load, announcing he was heading to Swantian Academy. Curious, the girl asked how his father had gotten the item, but Wudi refused to answer. Then Wudi admitted that he couldn't protect his son anymore, so sending him to the academy was the best way to keep him safe. While the young man secretly checked a map, the patriarch spoke to the girl about the mystery surrounding Ling's body. He then asked her, a nine-tailed fox who was nearly at the emperor level, to protect him. Xiaoyu raised her hand, confirming that she understood how serious it was. She then asked who would bring them food after she and the boy left. In the background, the whole group froze as they realized the situation. Finally, Woody shouted for everyone to eat since that would be their last good meal. Xiaoyu then said her goodbyes and told him to enjoy the moment. As soon as she turned around, he shouted for her to wait, but the girl immediately warned that she wouldn't be bringing food anymore. Then, with a serious look, the father reminded her that the world was on the verge of falling apart. Right after that, he warned her that the hidden power inside Ling needed to wake up because time was running out. The scene shifts to the massive entrance of Xuantian Academy, where an instructor is busy keeping the line in order and making sure no one cuts ahead. The students are told to get their entrance tokens ready for inspection. Carrying his bags, Ling watches the crowd, hoping to stay under the radar. The instructor explains that everyone must place their token into the mouth of a stone lion statue, which is designed to sniff out any bad actors or spies. Soon, the first person in line is called up. The candidate puts his token into the statue, which glows to confirm he is cleared to enter. He thanks the staff and heads inside. As the next person is called, they start to panic, worrying that their token might be a fake and that the statue will catch them. Suddenly, a scream rings out, grabbing everyone's attention. The examiner announces that they've caught a dark cultivator because the statue has clamped down on the person's hand. A bystander explains that the stone lion won't let go once it detects something wrong, which absolutely terrifies everyone watching. The captured man begs for a second chance, but the instructor ignores him and tells the guards to take him away. Next, the examiner and another student point toward Ling, telling him it is his turn. The instructor mentions that he looks suspicious because of his huge backpack and demands he hand over his token. Ling repeats the instructions to himself so he won't mess up, but his hands are shaking as he approaches the statue. Just then, a strange tremor ripples through the courtyard floor. Ling finally reaches out and places his hand inside the lion's mouth. At first, the instructor confirms that the ticket is valid as the statue begins to glow. Ling lets out a sigh of relief, but then the statue's eyes flash bright red. In an instant, the stone lion bites down hard on his arm. The lion's head actually snaps off its base while still locked onto his arm, and the rest of the statue crumbles into a pile of rocks. The examiner is completely stunned and stands there frozen, unable to figure out why the head is still attached to the boy. Feeling awkward, Ling apologizes and tries to clean up the mess by picking up the broken stone pieces. The instructor immediately accuses him of being a dark cultivator and orders the guards to arrest him. As they grab him, Ling tries to argue that his ticket is legitimate. The examiner explains that the lion only attacks when it senses dark energy. It's only then that Ling realizes he must have been contaminated by dark energy just from living around other people. Suddenly, Xiaoyu's voice booms across the courtyard, telling everyone to stop what they are doing. As she walks up, she questions why the cultivators are acting so recklessly. The crowd is confused about who she is, and the instructor asks why someone from a monster clan is sticking their nose into academy business. Xiaoyu simply grabs Ling's arm and introduces herself as his guardian. This revelation shocks the other students, who begin whispering that the boy must come from a very powerful family. Xiaoyu then suggests that the examiner take a closer look at where the admission ticket actually came from. Looking at the object on the ground, the man realizes it belongs to the legendary #1 sect in the world. Xiaoyu explains that although the sect was wiped out 20,000 years ago, Ling is its only remaining successor. One of the students asks how the most powerful sect in the world could have been taken down, noting that the name of the group was quite literal. Xiaoyu argues that given the sect's history, it makes perfect sense that the ticket would be covered in some dark energy. The instructor realizes this is a sensitive situation that needs to be handled with care. Even so, he warns the two of them to stay out of trouble and be on their best behavior. Xiaoyu tells Ling to relax so they don't look suspicious. She advises him to just act natural, and he repeats her advice to himself as they walk away. At the gates of the Xuantian Academy, a massive crowd had gathered. An instructor named Yanli watched the newcomers from a high tower with a bored expression. Another leader, Lu Hong, joined him and asked about the quality of the students. Yanli said there were some promising candidates this year. He pointed out a few talented students, including a cold, white-haired girl named Baidi and a flashy young man named Duan Zhang. Duan Zhang tried to flirt with Baidi, but she told him to get lost without even looking at him. People whispered about how she was a genius who had reached a high level of skill at only 11 years old. As the instructors watched, Yanli noticed something odd. He saw Ling in the middle of the crowd, casually juggling heavy stones and hammers. Lu Hong laughed it off, thinking the kid was just trying to show off his basic strength. Yanli wasn't impressed and doubted the show-off would even pass the first test. Yanli decided to make a dramatic entrance. He leaped out of the tower window and floated in midair to address the crowd. He introduced himself as the head instructor for the exam. While he was talking, Ling kept staring at him. Feeling uncomfortable, Yanli pointed at him and asked why he was staring. Ling nervously pointed out that the wire Yanli was hanging from looked a bit tight. The crowd went silent as they noticed the shiny wire holding the instructor up. Yanli was mortified that his trick had been exposed. He was lowered to the ground to face Ling. Trying to keep his cool, he gripped Ling's shoulders and said he looked forward to his results. Before he could say more, the wire suddenly jerked him back up into the air. air. Yanli flailed around like a fool, yelling at his assistants for messing up the timing. Beatty watched the scene in disbelief, wondering how an instructor could be so incompetent. Meanwhile, Lu Hong thought Ling was in trouble for offending such a petty man. Suddenly, Yanli flexed so hard his shirt ripped to shreds, showing off his muscles. He claimed his previous blunder was just to lighten the mood. The crowd was amazed, and one student claimed Yanli had a legendary physical build that could absorb any attack and turn it into energy. Yanli soaked up the praise, feeling powerful and ready to start the first round of the test. Ling just watched, wondering if ripping his shirt was a mandatory part of the exam. Ling started to worry as he imagined a strange scenario. His face darkened as he wondered if getting hurt was actually a requirement for cultivators. He thought to himself, does this mean only people who enjoy pain can do this? Meanwhile, Instructor Yanli was feeling extremely confident. He pointed at himself and announced the next test. Every student had to use their energy to punch him. He claimed he would judge their potential based on how hard they hit. He glanced at Ling, still feeling bitter about being corrected earlier. He decided he was going to humiliate the young man and eliminate him from the exam, no matter how much talent he had. Yanli pointed directly at Ling and told him to go first. Ling walked up, looking sincere, and warned the instructor to brace himself because his strength was a bit much. Yanli laughed so hard he cried. He joked that even a legendary master couldn't hurt him, so a new student certainly wouldn't stand a chance. Just as he finished talking, something moved too fast to see. Before Yanli could react, a fist slammed into his face. His expression twisted in pain, and he was sent flying backward like a meteor. He crashed through several walls, leaving the other students frozen in shock. Some of them turned pale, and the leader in the tower, Lu Hong, was so surprised he nearly fell over. Ling stayed in his follow-through stance, looking at the massive hole in the wall where the instructor used to be. Yanli was out cold on the ground. Ling turned to the crowd, patted his chest, and innocently asked if that meant he passed. The other students looked at him with pure fear. Xiaoyu flew down from a nearby roof, looking at him with pride. She was happy that Ling was already the center of attention. The crowd started whispering, confused because they thought the instructor was supposed to be invincible against students. One student, Tianji, sweated nervously, saying the books never mentioned a situation like this. In the distance, Baidi watched Ling closely. She realized he was hiding a massive amount of power and wondered how he did it. Lu Hong walked over to the unconscious instructor and then looked up at Ling. He noted that the power of that punch was at a level far beyond what a student should have. Ling just looked at the old man, thinking his colorful outfit made him look like a traffic light. Suddenly, Yanli woke up. He rushed back to Ling, furious. He yelled that Ling had taken advantage of him by attacking before he was ready, and that he was supposed to hit his stomach, not his face. Ling gave a sheepish grin and apologized. The students felt relieved, thinking the instructor only lost because he wasn't prepared. Yanli puffed out his chest and activated his strongest defensive move, calling it the immovable sandbag. He claimed that even a master using a lifetime of strength wouldn't be able to budge him now. Ling didn't wait. He stepped in and delivered a palm strike directly to the instructor's stomach. At first, it looked like nothing happened. The crowd cheered, impressed that the instructor hadn't moved an inch. But then Yanli's face crumpled. It turned out he hadn't moved because he had passed out while standing up. Ling realized the instructor wasn't doing well and dragged him away. He told the crowd that since the instructor was feeling sick, everyone should consider the first round cleared. The students erupted in cheers, happy to move on. Zhang approached Ling, introducing himself as Zhang from the Harmonious Union sect. He was impressed by the punch and offered to become sworn brothers with Ling. Then Tianji from the Heavenly Secrets sect joined them, offering to provide secret information in exchange for protection. Tianji admitted he didn't have any info on Ling and asked which sect he was from. Ling panicked, his face turning red as he tried to think of a cover story. Finally, he stammered that he was just a Han cultivator. Suddenly, the crowd parted for Beatty. She walked up to Ling and called him a show-off. She told him she would show him the true difference between a real genius and someone like him before walking away. Then Lu Hong appeared again, telling everyone not to celebrate too early. He pressed a button, and the ground began to shake. A puppet army marched into the plaza. Lu Hong explained that these mechanical constructs would fire weapons at the students for the duration of a timed test. He warned them that the weapons were real and dangerous. The puppets began firing blue beams, and the plaza turned into a chaotic scene. Students ran for their lives. Zhang tried to use his special techniques to defend himself, while Baidi showed off her impressive skills. Ling decided on a simpler approach. He started punching the puppets' core circuits, causing them to explode. He figured if they were broken, they couldn't attack him anymore. Lu Hong turned pale with rage, screaming that Ling was ruining the exam. He yelled that the test was about speed, not destruction, and threatened to disqualify him. Beatty watched him, thinking that men just love to show off. Lu Hong, now truly angry, decided to teach the brat a lesson. He took the controls and slammed a red button, causing the puppets to combine into one massive mechanical giant. Tianji panicked, recognizing the fusion as a high-level construct far stronger than any student. To make things worse, the weapons were now coated in a powerful numbing agent. Lu Hong's partner smirked, wanting to see the arrogant kid fail. The giant puppet attacked, but Ling dodged every move with ease. However, the other students weren't as lucky and got caught in the crossfire. Ling felt bad for involving them. Luhong, seeing that one puppet wasn't enough, frantically pressed the buttons to send every single puppet after Ling at once. Ling raised his hand to protect himself, not feeling afraid at all. From above, Luhong sneered, warning Ling that if he broke one more puppet, he would be kicked out of the exam immediately. The other students watched, relieved that the puppets were focusing all their energy on Ling instead of them. Tianji stood frozen, fearing for Ling's life since he wasn't allowed to fight back. Even Beatty smirked, thinking this was just the price he had to pay for showing off. Ling was genuinely confused. He didn't know how to handle the situation without breaking anything. Finally, he decided to leap into the air, aiming to separate the combined puppets by knocking into them and forcing them apart. Luhong was terrified, wondering how a student could fly. The others were stunned, assuming he had reached a high level of mastery to move like that. Tianji pointed out that Ling wasn't actually flying or using a special tool. He was using pure leg strength to jump and was stepping on the air to stay up. Luhong insisted that there had to be a limit to his stamina and used the controller to fire arrows at Ling's landing spot. Ling was stuck. He couldn't destroy the puppets, but he'd lose points if he got hit. Suddenly, he had an idea. He jumped onto the incoming arrows to stay airborne and then landed safely. Ling smiled and started approaching Beatty. She trembled, wondering why he was coming toward her and if he was some kind of weirdo. Instead, Ling ducked behind her, using her as a shield to dodge the puppets. Furious, she swung her sword at him, telling him to stop using her to hide. Ling apologized, sweating as he explained it was the only way he could think of to stay safe. Beatty decided to deal with Ling herself and attacked him. Ling took off running, ignoring her shouts to stop. The other students watched in confusion, feeling like the test had become a private battle between those two. Tianji, however, was full of admiration, amazed that Ling could slip through such a dangerous situation. Seeing the chaos, Luhong laughed, thinking Ling was finally trapped. Ling noticed the incense stick used by the time the test was almost gone. He took a deep breath and let out a massive gust of air. The force was so strong it sent everything flying. Luhong was surprised, but he mocked Ling, saying that having a long breath wouldn't help him pass. Ling calmly interrupted and pointed out that the incense had already burned out. It turned out the gust of air he blew made the incense burn much faster. Tianji cheered, claiming Ling did it on purpose to help everyone finish the test early. Beatty, red-faced and frustrated, walked away, promising she wasn't done with him yet. Suddenly, applause filled the air. An older man with bright red hair approached, praising the energy of this year's students. The crowd whispered, wondering if this was the dean of the academy. Some people noticed his hair looked like a wig that was about to fall off. Tianji warned them to be quiet, identifying the man as the legendary Tianxing, a powerful figure from 20,000 years ago. Xiaoyu, watching from a roof, realized Ling's breath had actually blown the dean's wig out of place. She whispered to Ling, telling him to fix it before the dean noticed. Ling rushed forward with incredible speed, so fast that almost no one saw him move, and put the wig back on. Ling gave a big smile and told the dean he had just dropped something and was happy to help. The dean was frozen in shock at the young man's speed. However, in his rush, Ling had accidentally poked the dean with a small hidden weapon. When Ling pointed out that the dean was bleeding, the dean tried to act tough, saying a small scratch couldn't hurt him. But a moment later, the dean collapsed from the injury. The students were underwhelmed, thinking the legendary dean was just an old man who talked too much. Another instructor shouted that everyone left in the courtyard had passed the second round and that class assignments would happen the next day. They scrambled to take the dean to the medical hall. As the tension eased, the students realized they had forgotten something important. The puppets were still attacking. Everyone panicked and ran for cover because the instructors forgot to turn them off. Meanwhile, Chunhuo watched from the shadows with a mean smile, happy that Ling was right where he wanted him. Later that night, Ling was training hard in his room, determined to pass the next day's test. Xiaoyu came in and told him to rest, offering to use some special oil to help him relax. Ling was a bit worried by the look in her eyes. As she stepped forward, she tripped and fell onto him. Outside, Beatty was walking by, still angry about the afternoon. She heard a noise from Ling's room and got curious. She peeked inside and saw a confusing scene. Because of the spilled red oil and the way they were positioned, she completely misunderstood what was happening. She kicked the door open, calling Ling a murderous maniac and telling him to surrender. Ling, who was just helping Xiaoyu with her coat, looked totally confused. Beatty was even angrier, thinking he was standing over a victim. Xiaoyu looked up, completely baffled as to why Beatty thought she was a body. Ling was caught off guard. Murderous maniac? He started sweating, wondering if she had somehow discovered his secret identity. Xiaoyu was also panicked and tried to explain that it wasn't what it looked like, but Beatty was too angry angry to listen. She drew her sword and attacked, using her special technique. Ling watched her movements closely. As she lunged at him, he realized he had no choice but to defend himself, even if it meant offending her. He dodged her blade with incredible speed, leaving Baidi stunned. She didn't give up, though, and launched an even faster attack. Ling didn't back down. He used his bare hand to punch right through her spiritual energy, shattering her attack. Baidi looked like she had seen a ghost. She couldn't believe a mortal had broken her technique with a punch. Ling quickly moved behind her and used a pressure point strike to knock her out. He felt guilty, thinking to himself that he only did it because he couldn't risk his identity being revealed. Xiaoyu realized he had used a special memory erasure move that uses physical force to temporarily scramble someone's thoughts. They decided to get her back to her room before anyone saw them. Ling carried her over the rooftops using his agility. He found what he thought was her room and placed her on the bed. Just then, her eyes started to flutter open. Panicking, Ling hit her with another memory erasure strike. She jolted, then fainted again. He felt terrible, worrying that using the move 3 times in a row might actually damage her memory. But he felt he had to protect his secret to keep his people safe. Looking around the messy room, he was surprised that a famous genius like Baidi lived in such a disaster. He noticed black footprints on the floor and realized he had to clean them up so there was no trace of his visit. He grabbed a mop and went to work, scrubbing the entire room until it was spotless. Meanwhile, in a garden nearby, a young man named Xiao Huo was sitting peacefully. He sensed someone approaching and told them to come out. It was just a cat, but then a man named Chunhuo emerged from a nearby lake using a breathing tube. Chunhuo was excited to find Xiao Huo and asked for his help to deal with the arrogant newcomer, Ling. Chunhuo offered to support Xiao Huo's future leadership in his family if he helped. Xiao Huo, remembering Ling's punch from earlier that day, agreed. Chunhuo planned to rig the upcoming exam so that Xiao Huo could find a reason to finish Ling off. Just as they finished talking, a giant python grabbed Chunhuo's legs. Xiao Huo sighed at how pathetic Chunhuo was, despite being an instructor. He quickly drew his sword and sliced the python to pieces. As Chunhuo fell into his arms, Xiao Huo shoved him into the water, feeling annoyed. Suddenly, a spirit named Dan Lao appeared from a ring on Xiao Huo's finger. Dan Lao warned him that Ling was much stronger than he looked, but Xiao Huo wasn't afraid. He revealed that he was actually a transmigrator from another world. He remembered his past life as a student who was hit by a truck and reborn as a useless young master. After finding the magic ring in a pile of junk, he began his journey to the top. He believed that as the main character of his story, Ling was just another obstacle for him to overcome. Back in his own room, Ling suddenly sneezed. He finished cleaning the messy room he thought belonged to Baidi, activated a hiding spell, and hurried back home. A moment later, Xiao Huo returned to that very same room. It was actually his room, not Baidi's. He was shocked to find it perfectly clean and even more surprised to see Baidi sleeping in his bed. He blushed, wondering why the dream goddess of the academy was in his room. He noticed the room was spotless and convinced himself that she must have cleaned it because she had a crush on him. He crouched by the bed, watching her sleep. Dan Lao appeared and noted that her mind seemed a bit dazed, which is why she wasn't waking up. Xiao Huo decided to use emergency rescue methods from his past life to help her. He leaned in close just as Baidi finally opened her eyes. A loud slap echoed through the night. Baidi chased him out of the room, calling him a pervert and slamming the door. Xiao Huo sat on the floor with a swollen face, totally confused. He told Dan Lao that she must have hit him because she was conservative and his rescue breath was just too intense for her. Dan Lao asked Xiao Huo, "Why are you so sure she likes you? Couldn't she have just walked into the wrong room by mistake?" Xiao Huo turned around, looking completely full of himself despite the blood streaming from his nose and mouth. He smirked and told Dan Lao that it wasn't even a question. He was the natural-born protagonist of this world. Dan Lao just yelled at him to wipe his face and stop acting cool. Meanwhile, Baidi was walking unsteadily, still holding her sword. She was confused about how she ended up in someone else's bed. She remembered going to Ling's room to argue with him, and suddenly, her memories came rushing back. She realized Ling was a demonic cultivator who used forbidden methods. She decided that the guy she just saw in the room must be his accomplice. A determined smile spread across her face as she shouted into the night, promising to find proof and expose Ling once and for all. Her shouting woke up everyone nearby, making them wonder what on earth was going on between those two in the middle of the night. The next day, a large crowd gathered for the final phase of the entrance exam. Everyone was getting impatient because no instructors had shown up yet. In a corner of the field, Ling was busy lifting heavy weights, telling himself he had to train even harder to pass. Xiaoyu tried to get him to relax, telling him that with his strength, he was a shoo-in for the advanced class. Baidi approached, glaring at Ling, and thinking he was just putting on a show. People started gossip about why she was so agitated, especially after she was heard calling his name the night before. Tianji acted like he knew a secret, telling others that their relationship was deeper than anyone imagined. Suddenly, a A sword landed right in front of him, nearly grazing his throat. It was Xiaohuo, looking ready to finish anyone who talked bad about Beatty. He claimed she was his chosen one and couldn't possibly be involved with someone like Ling. Dan Lao told him he was being way too overconfident. Finally, Instructor Yanli called for silence as the three head instructors appeared from the sky to oversee the match. He explained that this round was a combat arena test to see who could handle a real fight. The students would be assigned to classes based on how they performed. Headmaster Tian Xing was there to judge, and Ling couldn't help but notice he was wearing a brand new wig. Zhao Yu quickly told him to be quiet before he offended the headmaster again. The draw for the matches began. Lu Hong released a wooden log filled with numbers for the students to pick. As Ling reached in, Chunhuo, hiding behind a tree, shot a small dart with a piece of paper attached to it. The paper had the number 38 on it and stuck to Ling's hand. Chunhuo laughed to himself, proud that he had successfully rigged the match. Xiaohuo was a bit worried because his own number didn't match Ling's group. Chunhuo, who was literally coughing up blood from his previous injuries, told him not to worry. He explained that he wanted someone else to test Ling's limits first before Xiaohuo stepped in to finish the job. A huge shadow suddenly fell over Ling. It was a massive guy named Wang, holding number 37. He looked down at Ling with total contempt, calling him a weakling and telling him to surrender now. Tianji recognized the guy as a notorious fighter who never left an opponent standing. Wang patted Ling's cheek condescendingly, bragging that he was at the peak of his power and could crush Ling with a single blow. Xiao Yu was furious and tried to jump in, but she was held back. Everyone waited for Ling to explode with rage and fight back. Instead, Ling just scratched his head and apologized, saying his power was far too weak. The entire crowd was left speechless by his humble response. Xiao Yu was frustrated, telling Ling that there was no reason to be so polite to his opponent. Ling hesitated, looking down, and admitted that the big guy was right. There was a huge gap between them. Wang sneered, telling Ling to kneel if he wanted to live. But Ling looked up with a serious expression and said that even if he was weak, he still had a reason to fight. Wang just scoffed and walked away, telling Ling he'd finish him in the arena. Xiao Yu thought Ling sounded incredibly cool, but he just acted modest about it. Wang then met up with Xiaohuo and Chunhuo, reminding them that if he finished the kid, they had to make sure he got into the elite class. They promised him they still had plenty of influence at the academy, and Wang left feeling confident. Chunhuo couldn't wait for the match, hoping Ling wouldn't get knocked out too early. Finally, the instructor announced the first fight. Baidi stepped onto the platform to the sound of cheering fans. Her opponent was Zhang, who immediately started acting inappropriately, suggesting they cultivate together to improve their strength. The crowd went wild, screaming at him and throwing fruit and vegetables. Zhang dodged everything, bragging that attacks from behind never worked on him. However, he didn't notice the instructor standing right behind him. The instructor gave him a hard chop on the back, annoyed that all the thrown vegetables had hit him instead. Xiaohuo watched from the sidelines, furious that Zhang was flirting with his woman. Chunhuo found the whole thing embarrassing, but Xiaohuo just claimed it was part of his protagonist aura. The headmaster eventually told everyone to stop the nonsense and start the match. Zhang bragged that Baidi didn't understand the true power of his sect. He used a technique that created two clones of himself by moving incredibly fast. The crowd was impressed, but Baidi just looked at his feet. She could clearly see where he was actually standing and kicked him right in the groin. Zhang doubled over in pain, yelling about her cheating, but then he pulled out a mirror and a glowing sphere of energy, saying he was done being nice. Ling was confused, wondering why Zhang didn't just throw the energy ball. A student nearby explained that low-level cultivators can barely keep energy outside their bodies, let alone throw it far. Ling finally realized just how strong Xiao Yu and her father really were. Baidi toyed with Zhang for a while, dodging every attack. Eventually, Zhang used a secret technique to control the energy sphere with invisible threads, making it follow his movements. The instructors were impressed by his control. The sphere shot toward Baidi with incredible speed. Inwardly annoyed that a guy like this was forcing her to actually draw her sword, she made a swift move. With one quick slash, she shattered the energy sphere. At the exact same moment, the front of Zhang's pants ripped open. He froze in shock, realizing his best attack had failed so easily. He collapsed to the ground, still mumbling about how impressive she was before passing out. The instructor announced Baidi as the winner, and she walked off the stage as the crowd cheered for her sect. Ling watched, finally getting an idea of how cultivators actually fight. Suddenly, a girl named Morong came pushing through the crowd, struggling to carry a giant chicken leg that was even bigger than her head. Ling's eyes were glued to the sight, but it wasn't what most people thought. Morong's eyes sparkled as she admired Baidi from afar, wishing she could be just as strong. Meanwhile, Ling was actually staring longingly at the massive drumstick she was holding. It was huge. Xiao Yu, however, completely misunderstood. She noticed Ling's intense gaze and looked at her own chest, wondering if he preferred girls with more ample features. Morong noticed his stare too, but being kind-hearted, she asked if he was hungry. Ling was actually drooling a bit, and though he tried to deny it, his hands were already reaching for the meat. After training all night, he was starving. Xiao Yu was heartbroken and suspicious, watching Ling happily share a meal with this strange woman. While they ate, Ling realized he hadn't even asked her name. She smiled shyly and introduced herself as Murong. Zhao Yu was surprised to learn she had been at the academy since last year. Murong admitted she was a repeater because her grades were so poor. If she didn't pass this placement exam, she'd be expelled. Tianji chimed in with some background info. Murong came from a famous family of alchemists. She had pioneered a unique way to turn medicine into delicious food without losing its healing power. Ling was shocked to realize he had just eaten high-grade spiritual medicine, but she generously told him it was fine because she hated seeing people go hungry. Ling called her an angel, which only made Zhao Yu more annoyed. Suddenly, the crowd surged as people tried to get Beatty's attention with flowers and confessions. She ignored them all with her usual coldness. Murong politely approached her, eyes sparkling, and asked for an autograph. Beatty glanced at her and gave some cryptic advice. Be more careful about the friends you make. Then, Beatty pointed right at Ling and declared that she would find out the truth about what happened last night. That one sentence sent the crowd into a frenzy of gossip. People started wondering if Ling and the ice-cold Beatty were actually a couple. Murong got excited and begged Ling to introduce her to Beatty so she could learn to be strong. Before he could answer, the instructor, Yanli, started shouting for Murong to get on stage. She realized she'd been distracted and ran off, telling Ling he must remember to help her. Xiaoyu warned Ling to stay away from her, calling her a weird repeating student, but Ling felt she was a good person at heart. Yanli warned Murong that this was her final chance. She was terrified but determined. She couldn't bear the thought of being sent home in disgrace. Her opponent, number 36, stepped forward. It was Xiao Huo. He pulled back his hood and smirked, looking ready for a fight. In the stands, the headmaster and Lu Hong discussed her situation. Lu Hong explained that she had failed almost everything, including her alchemy exam because she kept making dinner instead of pills. If she lost this match, she was definitely out. Even Tianji was worried, noting that while she was great at cooking medicine, she had zero combat skills. This match was looking very one-sided as the instructor gave the signal to start. Zhao Huo started meditating, preparing for his big move. He chuckled to himself, thinking about how lucky he was to face such a cute opponent in the first round. He began daydreaming about winning, and Murong being so impressed that she'd join his harem and give him a hug. He even imagined Beatty getting jealous and calling her a vixen. He was so lost in his own head that he didn't see Murong coming until she punched him square in the face. The blow sent him sprawling. Xiao Yu frowned, wondering why that idiot was just standing there smiling instead of moving. Ling guessed he was probably off in some happy dreamland. Even the spirit Dan Lao flew out of the ring to yell at him, warning him not to get finished in the very first round. Xiao Huo brushed it off, confidently claiming he was the main character. Murong lunged in to keep the pressure on, but this time Xiao Huo caught her wrist. He told her the same trick wouldn't work twice and tossed her over his head. She landed on her feet and charged again, but he kept dodging. He told her she'd never land a hit with normal punches. Ling cheered for her from the sidelines, but after a few more exchanges, Murong was exhausted. Determined not to lose her last chance to stay in school, she pulled out 2 more giant drumsticks and stuffed them into her mouth. Ling was amazed, realizing she wasn't just hungry. She was using the spiritual energy in the food to boost her power. However, Tianji turned pale. He explained that those drumsticks were packed with high-level medicine. Eating that much at once was dangerous. She could literally explode from the energy surge. Suddenly, her body erupted in a brilliant light. When the glow faded, she looked stronger than ever, though the explosion had shredded parts of her dress. Every man in the audience immediately got a nosebleed. Xiao Huo's nose was bleeding too, but he stayed smug. He told her that even a last-minute power-up wouldn't be enough to defeat him. She didn't listen and lunged again. He dodged, and her fist shattered the stone ground where he had been standing. Dan Lao panicked, telling Xiao Huo to stop playing around because her strength was now far beyond a normal student's level. Xiao Huo realized he had to get serious and summoned his sword. When their strikes collided, the power was so intense that Xiao Huo was sent flying again. Ling was mesmerized by her strength, but Xiao Yu noted that she was only forcing her cultivation level higher and wouldn't be able to maintain it for long. Yanli worried the boy might actually get finished off, but the headmaster told him to keep watching. Xiao Huo stood up and wiped the blood from his face, annoyed that a native girl had pushed a transmigrator like him this far. He vanished in a flash of speed, running in circles so fast that Murong couldn't track him. Ling and Xiaoyu tried to warn her as a dark figure appeared in the air behind her. She looked up just in time to dodge a massive downward strike that would have finished the fight. Xiao Huo, now fully focused, created a fiery orb shaped like a lotus flower in his hand. He threw the pure heart fire lotus directly at her. The orb hit, engulfing Murong in flames. She screamed from the heat, and as the fire died down, the audience gasped. Her clothes had been almost completely burned away, leaving her trying to cover herself in embarrassment. The crowd went wild, some calling Xiao Huo a pervert while others were just stunned by the technique. Xiao Yu quickly covered Ling's eyes, telling him not to look at the blackness, even though he was just being blocked. Up in the stands, the instructors recognized the strange fire lotus technique. They agreed the match was basically over. Xiao Huo watched her, delighted and waiting for her to finally give up. Murong looked at her opponent, but she wasn't ready to give up yet. She suddenly pulled out a large bottle and drank the entire thing in one gulp. As she slammed the empty bottle onto the ground, shattering it, her body surged with a new wave of energy. Her eyes blazed with determination, leaving Xiaohuo completely stunned. She immediately rushed forward, unleashing a flurry of hits that forced Xiaohuo to use his weapon just to block. The crowd was shocked by her sudden burst of power. The head of the Martial Institute watched from the stands and sighed, wondering if the girl had lost her mind. Ling was also amazed, asking if she had reached a new level of strength. However, Xiaoyu realized something darker was happening. She explained that Murong wasn't just using medicine anymore. She was burning her own life force to keep fighting. In the arena, Murong had gone into a frenzy. Her mind was focused on one single thought: I can't lose. Xiaohuo, feeling the weight of her attacks, let out a grunt and smirked. He decided that if she wouldn't back down, he'd have to force her. He used his pure Heartfire Lotus technique again, causing explosions all around them that sent her flying. Before she could recover, he channeled energy into his blade and threw it straight at her. The instructors in the stands panicked, realizing this was about to turn into a tragedy. They screamed for the match to be stopped. Yanli, the referee, tried to fly in to help, but he realized he was too far away. The blade was moving like a guillotine, and it looked like it was going to be too late. As the blade neared her face, Murong's life flashed before her eyes. She remembered her father throwing a plate of her food to the ground, calling her cooking a shameful and unorthodox path that ruined their family's reputation as alchemists. He had even slapped her for defending her recipes. Her own siblings had mocked her, suggesting they send her away to the academy just to get rid of her and marry her off to someone else. They had yelled at her to leave and never come back. Tears had streamed down her face back then, as she promised to prove that her food was just as valuable as any medicine. But now, facing the blade, she felt just as useless as she did that day. She closed her eyes and smiled faintly, ready to accept her fate. Suddenly, a figure dropped from the sky. With just one finger, he stopped the flying blade in its tracks. Xiaohuo's eyes widened in disbelief, and Murong was completely taken aback. It was Ling. He stood firmly in front of her, shielding her with his body. He looked at Xiaohuo and said that Murong was a good person and he wouldn't let anyone hurt her. Xiaohuo scoffed, trying to act tough, and told Ling to get out of the way. But when he tried to pull his blade back, it wouldn't move an inch. Ling's grip was like iron. Xiaohuo was internally shaken, realizing this kid's strength was absolutely incredible. Just as things were about to escalate, Yanli finally landed between them and ended the fight. He officially announced Xiaohuo as the winner. Xiaohuo snorted, grabbed his blade, and walked away, acting like he hadn't just been outmatched. As he walked away, Xiaohuo looked back with a provocative smirk. "You better win this round, otherwise I won't get the chance to deal with you myself." Ling just scratched his head, looking totally indifferent. "Yeah, I'll try my best to pass the first round," he replied. His calm attitude really annoyed Xiaoyu. "That guy was clearly threatening you. How can you be so relaxed?" she huffed. The oblivious Ling didn't get it at all. "Huh? What do you mean?" Before they could say more, a loud coughing fit caught their attention. Murong was hacking and struggling to catch her breath. Ling quickly helped her up, asking if she was okay. She gave a shy smile and took his hand. "Thank you for saving me," she whispered, looking away with a self-conscious expression. "It's a pity I risked everything and still couldn't win even one game." Suddenly, she started coughing again and actually vomited, which sent Ling and Xiaoyu into a total panic. Ling yelled for Xiaoyu to get some healing medicine, but Murong waved them off. She wiped her mouth and even managed a little chuckle. "Don't worry, I'm fine now. I just ate way too much and threw it all up, that's all." Ling tried to help her to a place where she could rest, but Yanli stopped him. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, crossing his arms. "It's your turn for the next match." Ling realized he had almost forgotten his own fight. In the distance, a man with a fierce aura was approaching. It was his opponent, Wang. Ling asked Xiaoyu to take Murong down to rest. Xiaoyu agreed, but she was definitely gritting her teeth. "Why do I have to take care of this girl?" she muttered to herself as they walked away. Murong waved at Ling, telling him to do his best. In the center of the arena, Ling and Wang stood face to face. Yanli shouted for them to get ready. Wang sneered, telling Ling that standing there was his last mistake. Ling just stood silently, carefully watching his opponent's movements. Yanli leaped into the air and gave the signal to begin. Wang slammed his massive iron pillar against the stone floor, the sound echoing through the entire arena. He laughed triumphantly. "If you won't surrender, I'll have to finish you." From the stands, everyone was terrified by the power coming from Wang's weapon. They worried that one hit would be enough to end the match instantly. Murong asked if Ling would be okay, but Xiaoyu just sighed. "You really don't understand how strong he is. No attack is going to make Ling fall today." After the initial bang, there was a moment of silence. Ling stayed focused, wondering what kind of technique his opponent would use next. Wang took a deep breath and let out a roar so powerful it tore his clothes to shreds. When the dust settled, the entire crowd was left speechless and horrified. Instead of some cool armor, Wang was now standing there wearing bright pink and purple women's lingerie and stockings. He even struck a pose to match his new look. The sight was so disturbing that one student almost almost threw up on the spot. Two girls in the stands actually fainted. People were clutching their stomachs and shielding their eyes, unable to handle the visual shock. One person trembled, realizing that making your opponent so nauseous they can't stand was actually a legitimate and disgusting strategy. Even the instructors were offended. One yelled that such an eye-searing display was an insult to the Academy's reputation. Another noted that while it was superficial, it was clearly working. Everyone in the arena was doubled over in distress. Ignoring the chaos, Wang roared "Die!" and slammed his heavy iron pillar down toward Ling, sending debris flying everywhere from the massive impact. Fortunately, Ling managed to dodge the hit. Otherwise, that kind of weight would have been impossible to handle. Seeing his attack miss, Wang's face darkened. He told Ling not to even dream of escaping and began attacking with lightning speed, combining his techniques and spiritual power. Ling dodged every single blow, but Wang's whirlwind assault was hard to watch, mostly because of that unbearable outfit. The crowd was reaching its limit, with people complaining that they couldn't take the blinding sight anymore. Suddenly, Murong realized something. While everyone else was just disgusted, she pinched her nose and analyzed the situation. She explained that Wang's behavior was just a smokescreen. His real tactic was that his iron pillar was secretly releasing toxic smoke. Wang laughed, realizing his plan had worked. He bragged that it was too late because everyone around the arena had already inhaled the gas, securing his victory. Ling and Xiaoyu quickly covered their noses, furious that he would use such a despicable trick. In the stands, the person who had hired Wang was grinning with pride. Even though he was also feeling a bit pale from the gas, he was thrilled that his assassin was winning. Ling was struggling now, coughing repeatedly as the poison began to take effect. He felt his strength fading and his body started to ache. Everything began to blur for Ling. Wang mocked him, asking if he still wanted to struggle when he couldn't even use his strength. Seeing Ling lose focus, Wang lunged forward to end the fight. He swung the iron pillar against Ling's head, causing a spray of red. With the upper hand, Wang rained down a flurry of blows. It was a brutal assault that made it difficult for Ling to even stay on his feet. The audience was terrified, thinking Ling wouldn't survive this. Murong screamed for him to stop fighting, and Xiaoyu begged the judges to end the match. However, Yanli maintained that Ling still had the ability to fight back. One woman in the stands watched with disappointment, thinking Ling was far weaker than she had hoped. Wang raised his weapon high for one final fatal strike. A loud crash echoed through the arena as the pillar hit home, but to everyone's shock, Ling was still standing. He gripped the iron pillar, stopping it in its tracks while gasping for air. Wang was surprised but stayed smug, asking how Ling could still resist with so little strength left. Ling, with his face covered in red, raised a clenched fist. He calmly explained that because he couldn't use his normal strength, he had to put everything he had into this one attack. Wang scoffed, thinking a weak fist couldn't possibly hurt him. But as soon as Ling's fist lightly touched his stomach, Wang's eyes went wide. That light touch felt like a dam bursting. All the energy Ling had been holding back was released at once. The pressure was so intense it felt like a massive earthquake. Everyone was left speechless. Wang, foaming at the mouth, couldn't understand how this was possible before he collapsed at Ling's feet. Ling slowly caught his breath and wiped his face. Wang, looking pale on the ground, asked how he could win while being poisoned. Ling looked down at him and mentioned that he has a certain ability that kicks in specifically when he's been weakened. Terrified, Wang called him a monster. The announcer reluctantly declared Ling the winner. The headmaster, watching from above, ordered the toxic smoke to be cleared. An object was thrown into the arena that created a small rain shower. The crowd rejoiced, realizing the rain was the antidote. As the poison was neutralized, Ling felt his full strength finally returning. Just then, Murong came running over, absolutely overjoyed. She immediately gave Ling a huge hug, pulling him close and making him blush like crazy. Ling was too embarrassed to even focus on her praise, stammering for her to wait a second. Xiaoyu, watching this from behind, flew into a total rage, and the people nearby scrambled out of her way. Xiaoyu marched over and pulled them apart, yelling at Murong to stay away from him. Murong tried to explain that she was just expressing how much she admired him, but Xiaoyu wasn't having it. "You're just taking advantage of him," she shouted. Watching from a distance, Xiaohuo scowled, his teeth clenched in jealousy. He muttered to himself that he should be the one surrounded by beautiful women. Chunhuo, hearing this, asked him darkly how he really compared to Ling. Xiaohuo quickly recovered his cool and grinned, focusing energy in his hand. He told Chunhuo that the word lose didn't exist in his vocabulary. But just as he was feeling confident, a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. It was the Academy's discipline head, Tiandu, holding a penalty slip. "Setting a fire in the courtyard, that's a fine of 500 spirit stones," he said coldly. Xiaohuo was furious and demanded to know who Tiandu thought he was. Chunhuo quickly jumped in to calm him down, whispering that Tiandu was the dean's right-hand man and not someone to mess with. Xiaohuo realized the dean was watching them with a sharp gaze, so he backed down and agreed to pay the 500 stones. However, Tiandu wasn't finished. He handed over even more slips, showing malice toward Academy staff, an additional fine of 1,000 spirit stones. Xiaohuo trembled with rage, and Chunhuo had to hold him back. Heartbroken over the loss of his money, Xiaohuo sat on the ground and cried silently, vowing to get back at the dean and that old man later. He then glared toward Ling, blaming him for everything. Ling suddenly felt a chill down his spine and told Xiaoyu he felt really cold. Just then, Tianji approached, looking excited. "Boss Ling, you're incredible! You beat that 5-star assassin so easily!" Ling smiled and told him it wasn't as easy as it looked. Tianji proudly showed off a notebook, explaining that he had spent a lot of money at the black market to get all the info on Wang. Ling thanked him, but before they could talk more, Instructor Yanli started yelling for Tianji to get moving. "Hey fatty, you're the first fighter for this round," Yanli shouted. Tianji realized it was his turn and stepped into the arena to face his opponent Jiaxu. Jiaxu had a cold, intense stare. Lu Hong was surprised to see him, realizing Jiaxu was actually the dean's grandson. The dean confirmed it, grumbling that his grandson refused to learn the family secrets, so he sent him to the academy instead. The crowd was buzzing, wanting to get on the good side of Dean's grandson. Ling yelled a reminder to Tianji not to finish him off. Tianji just chuckled, looking at his notebook full of intel. He was confident that even though his fighting skills were average, his information on Jiaxu would give him the win. Yanli gave the signal to start, immediately activated his Divine Eye technique. Ling noted that the move looked powerful, and Xiaoyu added that it was a rare secret technique of the Heavenly Secret sect that was very hard to master. She was actually impressed, seeing that Tianji really did have some skills as he took his fighting stance. Jiaxu looked at Tianji with a sneer and charged forward. "Not bad," he said. "Let's see how effective your Divine Eye really is." Tianji narrowed his eyes and calmly called out his technique, Heavenly Secrets Divination. Instantly, a full profile of Jiaxu appeared before him. As he scanned the data, he thought to himself that if Jiaxu used kicks, he only had a 10% chance of hitting, while earth-based moves had a massive 85% success rate. Jiaxu didn't waste any time and threw a heavy punch. "Earth Tremor," he shouted. The strike created a solid stone wall that surged toward Tianji. However, when the dust cleared, Jiaxu was surprised to see Tianji still standing. The fatty laughed smugly, bragging that he had predicted the attack long ago and couldn't be touched. Ling was a bit surprised by how agile Tianji was moving. Xiaoyu noted that it was the power of the Divine Eye, which allowed Tianji to channel the strength of his sect's ancestors. Back on stage, Tianji turned serious, focusing his eyes to analyze the next move. He predicted there was a 90% chance Jiaxu would try close-quarters combat after using an earth move to close the distance. Meanwhile, Jiaxu stomped the ground, releasing a burst of crimson energy. Using a move called Earth God's Breath, he vanished and reappeared right in front of Tianji, facing a fist glowing with heat. Tianji stayed calm, raising his hand to the exact spot his prediction suggested. He smiled, thinking he was about to block the hit perfectly, but his joy vanished instantly. Jiaxu's fist landed squarely on Tianji's cheek, catching him completely off guard. A second blow sent Tianji flying across the arena. Jiaxu was actually surprised by how easily the hit landed. Tianji lay flat on the ground, motionless. Ling shouted out in worry, but even while injured, Tianji struggled to pull out his notebook. He carefully wrote, "Next time, remember to calculate the difference in actual strength." Ling looked at him with exasperation, telling him he didn't need to be taking notes right now. Tianji passed out completely shortly after. Jiaxu looked at the instructor, Yanli, with a worried expression, asking if the boy was okay. Yanli didn't seem to care and simply congratulated Jiaxu on his victory. Up in the stands, Lu Hong was impressed by how much Jiaxu had improved. The headmaster, however, was frustrated that his grandsons still refused to use their family-specific techniques. Jiaxu caught the headmaster's gaze but said nothing, turning away coldly and leaving the stage. Tianji eventually woke up to find himself being carried on Ling's shoulder. He was surprised, but Ling just smiled and told him he actually looked pretty impressive out there. Diankin thought he was being teased, but Ling insisted he was serious, even wishing he had the talent to learn such a move. Tianji laughed, telling Ling that he was already plenty strong without needing extra tricks. Instructor Yanli then made a loud announcement. For the next round, opponents would be assigned randomly. This took the headmaster by surprise, while Lu Hong guessed that Yanli was just making up rules as he went. Below the stage, Xiaohuo was gritting his teeth in frustration, wondering when he'd finally get his chance to fight Ling. Chunhuo told him not to worry, glancing at the instructor with a smirk. He noted that Ling had offended far more people than just the two of them. implying the random draw might be anything but fair. Up in the stands, Yanli quickly drew 2 slips and announced loudly, "The first match has been selected." Everyone fell silent, watching his hands with bated breath. He stared seriously at the names. "This match will be Ling." Hearing his name, Ling focused intently on the stage. His opponent's name was announced immediately after, versus Xiaohuo. This result made Xiaohuo let out a satisfied, cold laugh. To the crowd, the outcome seemed like a done deal, but Xiaoyu was immediately suspicious. She looked at Yanli and called it absurd. She couldn't believe that out of everyone, Ling randomly had to fight Xiaohuo. Morong also voiced her doubts, noting she had never heard of the second round being random before. Yanli ignored them at first, but when Xiaoyu raised her voice to ask if the arrangement was rigged, he frowned. He told her not to joke around, claiming the academy would never rig things against new students. Xiaohuo stepped onto the stage, agreeing with the instructor. He bragged that he believed instructor Yanli wouldn't show favoritism to anyone. Then, he looked at Ling with a challenge. "Are you hesitating because you're afraid of my power?" he asked arrogantly. Xiaoyu fumed, calling him a brat, but Ling stayed calm. He said there was no need for more words and stepped into the arena. He knew that if he wanted to get into a better class, he couldn't back down now. Xiaoyu was touched by his determination, and Morong's eyes lit up with admiration, saying Ling looked handsome when he was serious. This, of course, made Xiaoyu uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Tianji saw both girls' reactions and quickly jotted down a note about their interest in Ling. The two opponents stood face to face. Xiaohuo sneered, surprised that Ling actually dared to show up. He mysteriously drew his sword and suddenly lunged forward. The attack caught Ling off guard, forcing him to retreat quickly. Xiaohuo shouted that it was time to settle all their grudges. Seeing this dirty trick, Xiaoyu screamed that the match hadn't even officially started yet and called it a sneak attack. Yanli just whistled and pretended he hadn't seen anything. Xiaoyu was furious, feeling like everyone at the academy was targeting Ling. In the arena, Xiaohuo kept swinging his sword, and Ling struggled to dodge. Suddenly, Ling vanished, which caught Xiaohuo by surprise. Chunhuo shouted a warning from below, telling Xiaohuo that Ling was behind him. Ling was indeed right there, preparing a punch. Xiaohuo turned his head and sneered, admitting Ling was fast but claiming it wouldn't be enough. Suddenly, a blinding green flame erupted, covering the entire arena and forcing even the instructor to step back. Ling retreated, realizing he had to be more forceful. One of his arms had been caught in the green flames. Xiaohuo stood in the middle of the fire, looking smug. He told Ling that he had figured out his fighting style. As long as he didn't let Ling get close, Ling was helpless. Ling blew hard on his hand to put out the fire, cold sweat dripping down his back from the heat. Before he could plan his next move, Xiaohuo pushed his power to the limit. The flames formed into a massive dragon as he unleashed the Azure Flame Dragon King technique, attacking Ling with enough power to shake the ground. Ling retreated, thinking to himself that the temperature of those green flames was just too high to handle with his bare skin. Below the stage, Chunhuo watched the spectacle with a smug grin, laughing and shouting for Xiaohuo to corner him. Meanwhile, Baidi was observing closely, wondering if Ling's demonic tricks were finally about to be exposed. On the arena floor, Ling was forced back until he had nowhere left to run. Xiaohuo, satisfied that he had his opponent trapped, shouted "Die!" and unleashed a powerful move called Twin Dragons entering the sea. Watching from below, Morong's eyes shone with excitement. Ling is finally getting serious. He looks so handsome when he's focused, she cheered. Beside her, Tianji was busy taking notes, wondering exactly what kind of technique Ling would use to counter such a massive attack. Ling chuckled and extended his hand, shouting immortal technique. A massive power suddenly enveloped him, and his expression hardened as he activated his defense. He effortlessly caught and controlled Xiaohuo's fire dragon. He looked at his opponent calmly and explained, "This is an immortal technique I developed by combining my own exercise experience." Pretty impressive, right? Xiaohuo's face darkened with rage. "That's not an immortal technique at all," he roared, but he quickly regained his cool, a sinister smile spreading across his face. "So you can catch my Azure Flame barehanded? Not bad, but I have more tricks up my sleeve." Ling looked down at his hands in surprise, as the power he was holding suddenly broke apart into small specks. They transformed into strange floating lotus flowers that surrounded him. Xiaohuo laughed triumphantly, telling Ling that he couldn't possibly defend against such a dense, concentrated attack with just his hands. Ling realized he needed something stronger. He stomped his foot and shouted, "Immortal technique, left and right horizontal leap." Suddenly, multiple copies of Ling appeared, rushing forward to dodge the explosions. Below the stage, Zhang was shocked, shouting, "How did you learn my secret movement technique?" Someone nearby told him to be quiet, noting it was just high-speed movement and had nothing to do with his sex tricks. Ling was incredibly tense, doing his best to weave through the attacks. Xiaohuo gritted his teeth in anger, realizing Ling was using the air currents from his high-speed movement to blow the fire lotuses away. What a troublesome savage, he he muttered, not wanting to let the fight drag on. Xiao Huo clasped his hands together as his spiritual energy intensified. He told Ling that he was already trapped. "Take this! Lava prison!" he shouted. The ground shook violently and began to crack, startling Ling and worrying the crowd. Tianji was confused, wondering how Xiao Huo could use an earth-type technique when his powers were supposed to be metal and fire. Murong agreed, noting she couldn't sense any earth energy at all. On the other side, Xunhuo was cheering, calling it Xiao Huo's signature spiritual root switch. Xiao Huo yelled back, telling him to stop giving his moves random names. He thought to himself that these natives had no brains and didn't understand the basic principles of how elements work together. High above, the instructors watched with admiration. The headmaster ordered the match to be recorded, but Lu Hong interrupted him. Looking shocked, he pointed out that the lava rock being used was a condensed form of earth essence that cost at least 5,000 spirit stones to create. Ling was now nowhere to be seen, replaced by a massive blue rock, surrounded by swirling energy. In the arena, Xiao Huo looked at his work with a huge grin. He felt like he had finally mastered the rules of this world, believing that even with just 2 elements, he could create endless variations. He knelt down, channeling his energy into the floor. "Take this! Lava bombardment!" he shouted. Suddenly, the rocks around Ling transformed and crashed down, burying him completely. Seeing this, Murong and Tianji screamed in shock, fearing the worst. High above, the headmaster turned pale and staggered back, not out of grief, but because those expensive spirit stones were being destroyed. Lu Hong had to grab him to keep him from falling over. Murong couldn't just stand there. She grabbed a giant drumstick and started charging toward the stage to save him. Xiao Yu caught up and snatched the drumstick away, telling her not to make things harder for Ling. Murong struggled, asking if Xiao Yu was just going to watch him get finished off. Xiao Yu calmly reassured her that a simple move like that wouldn't be enough to hurt him. Xiao Huo was feeling on top of the world, clapping his hands. He mocked the natives of this world, thinking they were no match for him. But his celebration didn't last long. The ground began to shake violently, and a blinding light leaked out from the cracks. The entire arena started to tremble. Tianji stumbled, wondering what was happening, while Murong asked if it was an earthquake. Xiao Yu just smiled confidently, knowing Ling was unbeatable. Suddenly, the ground shattered, and the rocks burying him were sent flying into the air. Ling appeared amidst the debris, moving so fast it was a blur. Xiao Huo was terrified, stuttering and unable to understand how Ling had escaped. Xiao Yu noted that compared to Ling's usual training, those rocks were nothing. Ling landed smoothly and casually brushed off his clothes. "This weight is still a bit light," he remarked. Seeing him totally unharmed, Xiao Huo's face twisted with rage. He refused to admit defeat, shouting that as a child of the heavens, he wouldn't lose to anyone. He summoned a massive fancy blade from thin air, surrounding it with lightning. "Thunder slash!" he roared, swinging the blade down with everything he had. The headmaster watched, noting that Xiao Huo had let his anger cloud his judgment. Ling didn't panic. He moved in to intercept the strike. There was a massive impact that knocked Ling back a few steps, but the result was shocking. Xiao Huo's blade snapped clean in half. Before Xiao Huo could even process that his weapon was broken, Ling was already moving in for a punch. By the time Xiao Huo saw the fist coming, it was too late. Another tremor shook the arena, sending dust everywhere. Xiao Huo stood frozen, finding Ling's fist stopped just inches from his nose. Terrified, Xiao Huo collapsed to his knees, unable to speak. Ling calmly pulled his hand back and said, "You lose!" The crowd erupted in cheers, with Murong and the others celebrating his victory. On the other side, Chunhuo was fuming, calling Xiao Huo useless for losing to someone without special powers. Ling started to walk away, but Xiao Huo couldn't accept it. He struggled to his feet and yelled for him to come back. He turned to the spirit Dan Lao, begging for more power. Dan Lao tried to warn him, but Xiao Huo cut him off. He gritted his teeth, saying that if he couldn't even pass the entrance exam, then his whole journey to this world would be meaningless. Hearing Xiao Huo's words, Dan Lao felt powerless to refuse. He remembered Xiao Huo's past, how he was just an ordinary student who was teased by his classmates for loving manga. They had called him a weirdo, and Xiao Huo had gritted his teeth in anger, wishing he had a cheat or a special power, like the characters in his stories, to make them all envious. While lost in those thoughts crossing the street, he hadn't noticed the danger. A truck driver had yelled for him to get out of the way, but it was too late. When Xiao Huo next opened his eyes, he found himself in a new world, reborn as the young master of the Xiao family. He vowed then that no one would ever look down on him again because he had his own legendary cheat, a ring containing the soul of Dan Lao, a powerful master and alchemist. With Dan Lao's help, he had quickly reached the chi refining stage and dealt with his bullies. He became a family prodigy, admired by everyone. But as he gained power, his ambition grew. He wanted to become the clan leader and prove prove he wasn't just some weak, ordinary person. Stubbornly, he told the spirit on his finger that he refused to lose to anyone. Dan Lao sighed in resignation. "There's really no helping you," he muttered. He began to circulate his remaining energy, warning Xiao Huo that he only had enough power to last for half a stick of incense. As the power flowed into him, Xiao Huo chuckled confidently, telling Dan Lao not to worry. Up in the stands, Lu Hong was shocked to see Xiao Huo's energy suddenly spike. The headmaster agreed that the power was extraordinary. Dan Lao explained to Xiao Huo that while he was a master in his prime, he could only grant him the strength of the Golden Core stage for now. Xiao Huo didn't care. All that mattered was that he could finally use the 5 elements harmony. Using the elemental cycle, Xiao Huo declared, "Metal generates water." He launched a move called Four Seas Water Prison, quickly trapping Ling inside a massive sphere of water. Ling was startled and quickly covered his nose as he struggled within the sphere. Murong watched in panic, wondering how Xiao Huo's fighting power had suddenly skyrocketed. Tianji turned pale, noting that Xiao Huo's cultivation had somehow reached the Golden Core stage. Xiao Yu was furious, shouting that a new student shouldn't have that much power and accusing him of cheating. Xiao Huo frowned and told her not to talk nonsense without proof. He moved the water sphere closer to her, smirking. He told Ling that no matter how strong he was, he would be helpless underwater. Then, he created several sharp, black branches. "Earth generates metal, black profound shattering thorns," he shouted, throwing them into the sphere. Ling realized the danger, took a deep breath, and began to swim as fast as he can using his super swim technique. Seeing him try to escape, Xiao Huo became even more determined. "Trying to run?" he mocked. He used a binding spell, causing the branches to wrap tightly around Ling, trapping him within the water. Ling struggled against the strong branches, finding it hard to think while submerged. Xiao Huo rushed forward triumphantly, telling Ling he was finally feeling the true effect of a golden core technique. He then roughly bit his finger to prepare his next move. Seeing this, Dan Lao shouted in shock, "You're actually using your lifeblood for this attack! Don't you realize it will damage your very foundation?" But Xiao Huo remained stubborn. He knew he only had enough energy left for one final move, and had to make sure Ling couldn't escape. Without another word, Xiao Huo attacked. Metal generates water, water generates wood, wood generates fire, fire generates earth, earth generates metal. 5 elements cycle. "Give me your power," he roared. He concentrated a massive amount of energy into his hand and threw a punch so powerful that the entire ground shook violently. The crowd below the arena panicked and ran for their lives, screaming that this was no longer a fight between students, and they didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. The headmaster couldn't just stand by. He rushed down and used his power to suppress the overwhelming shockwave. The students rejoiced, amazed that the headmaster was a legendary master who could stop such an attack with one move. However, as he flew above, some noticed his prosthetic leg showing and wondered if he was actually okay. Xiao Huo didn't care about anything else. He stared resentfully at Ling, clenching his fist. "I don't want to be ordinary anymore. I must win," he screamed. As the attack rushed toward him, Ling showed no fear. He calmly gathered energy in his hand and said softly, "I'm sorry." Xiao Huo was surprised to see him so composed. Ling thought of the people he cared about and glared back. "Compared to you, I have even less reason to lose." He threw a punch that collided head-on with Xiao Huo's attack. In an instant, Ling's physical power completely overwhelmed Xiao Huo's spiritual energy. Xiao Huo couldn't believe his eyes. A massive aftershock rippled out, cracking the ground and sending rocks flying everywhere. The crowd huddled together, thankful the headmaster was protecting them from the blast. Even the academy buildings seemed to tremble for a moment before the energy finally dissipated. The headmaster stood there, breathing a sigh of relief but feeling totally stunned. He realized that Ling's punch had no spiritual energy at all. It was pure physical force. He wondered what kind of person could possibly be that strong. Ling stood calmly while Xiao Huo, who had been sent flying, sat on the ground panting. Dan Lao gently advised him that they had lost, but Xiao Huo stubbornly refused to believe it. "Impossible! A transmigrator like me can't lose," he yelled, trying to force his energy one more time. Dan Lao begged him to stop before he hurt himself further. Ling approached, startling him. "I'm really sorry," he said. With a simple snap of his fingers, he sent Xiao Huo flying again. Xiao Huo landed far away, unconscious. Ling looked at him seriously and whispered, "Because I'm a transmigrator too." The crowd erupted in cheers as the announcer officially declared Ling the winner. Xiao Yu and Murong rushed onto the stage. Xiao Yu hugged his arm, telling him how handsome he looked, while Murong asked if he could teach her how to be that strong. Ling laughed at the compliments, but then his stomach let out a loud rumble. Embarrassed, he admitted he had used up a lot of energy. Murong smiled and told him she had something delicious for him. She reached into her dress and pulled out a giant drumstick. "Here you go," she said. Xiao Yu turned red with anger and shouted, "Can you please not pull food out of such a strange place?" Murong innocently apologized, but as Ling stared at the drumstick and drooled, she added, "But that's where I have the most space." Xiao Yu Xiaoyu nearly fainted from frustration at her logic. Murong turned to Ling, who was eating happily, and smiled as she pulled out yet another drumstick. "If that's not enough, I've got more," she said. As Ling ate and laughed with delight, Xiaoyu stood to the side, fuming and biting her nails. She grumbled to herself, convinced that this green tea girl was definitely trying to move in on Ling. She vowed to learn how to cook so she wouldn't lose her place by his side. Instructor Yanli looked at them with irritation. "The match is over. Why are you still on the stage? Get down so the others can start," he shouted. Ling quickly apologized, but Xiaoyu snapped back, asking why he wasn't telling anyone else to move. Ling, still chewing his meat, suddenly had a thought. He hopped over to Xiaohuo and calmly offered him the half-eaten drumstick. "You must be starving after that fight. Here, have some," he said sincerely. Xiaohuo looked wary, and for a second, he actually stared at the juicy meat, but then he quickly swatted Ling's hand away. "I don't need your pity," he barked, turning to leave. Xiaoyu was furious at how he treated Ling and wanted to teach him a lesson, but Ling stopped her. "Let it go," he said softly. "If I had lost, I wouldn't be in a good mood either." Murong was impressed by his generosity, but Ling just noted that since they were from the same hometown, meaning they were both transmigrators, he didn't really want to be enemies. Both girls were confused by the hometown comment. In a corner below the arena, Chunhuo watched Xiaohuo's exit with pure contempt, spitting on the ground. "And he calls himself a chosen one," he muttered. He started plotting another way to deal with Ling, but he was immediately interrupted by Tian Du, who handed him a penalty slip. "Spitting on academy grounds. That's a fine of 100 spirit stones," the old man said sternly. Chunhuo was stunned and angry, but one look at Tian Du's dark expression made him force a smile and pay up. He glared at Ling, blaming him for the fine. Ling suddenly sneezed, making Xiaoyu worry he had caught a cold. Murong immediately offered him some ginger tea. Ling rubbed his nose, embarrassed, and joked that someone was probably just talking about him. Just then, Beatty's annoyed voice rang out from behind. "Ling!" He jumped and turned to see her looking furious. Her arrival immediately caught Instructor Yanli's attention, but she completely ignored him and walked straight up to Ling. "I admit, you have some skill," she said. Ling felt bad for the ignored instructor and whispered if it was okay to ignore him like that. Beatty didn't care. "You defeated Xiaohuo easily, which surprised me." Her words made Xiaohuo, who was still nearby, cough up blood in frustration. The crowd whispered about how she managed to offend two people with just one sentence. Beatty pointed her sword at Ling. "The others couldn't force you to reveal your true nature as a demonic cultivator, so I'll do it myself." Ling broke into a cold sweat, trying to act like he had no idea what she was talking about. She turned to Yanli and asked to go next. The instructor agreed, but said they needed to find her an opponent. Beatty raised her sword and looked at the crowd with a cold gaze. "Except for Ling, the rest of you can all come at me at once." The students were shocked. Some were excited, while others were offended that she thought she could take everyone. Xiaohuo watched her from below, impressed by her arrogance. "No wonder she's the woman I've got my eye on," he smirked. Dan Lao looked at him with annoyance. "Didn't you hear him? Ling is a transmigrator just like you. Stop with the child of destiny fantasies and focus on reality." Xiaohuo's face darkened, but he stayed stubborn, forcing a smile that was the complete opposite of Dan Lao's worried look. Dan Lao sighed, wondering how he ended up with this kid. Xiaohuo just scoffed and explained that since his enemy was a fellow transmigrator, the title of Child of Destiny was definitely his. He smiled confidently, vowing to cultivate hard and crush everyone beneath his feet. Up in the stands, one of the instructors, Tianxing, asked the headmaster if they should allow the chaos below, since it didn't really follow the rules. The headmaster looked on gravely but noted that young people always have a bit of excess energy to burn. He then spoke up, asking Beatty if she really wanted to challenge everyone at once. She looked up and firmly confirmed that she didn't want to waste any more time. The headmaster gave the signal for the competition to begin. Immediately, the crowd below surged toward Beatty. "We're all geniuses from our own clans. Don't be so arrogant," they yelled. She watched them coldly, muttering that their attacks were mere child's play. She swung her sword, unleashing a flurry of blades. One man stubbornly charged forward, shouting, "Watch my one force breaks all laws!" He focused his power into his weapon, calling out his purple thunder fury saber technique. Beatty scoffed at his attempt to compete in pure strength and swung her sword to meet him. Their weapons clashed, creating a massive explosion that sent him and several others flying across the arena. The man landed right near Tianji and Jiaxu. Tianji noted that it was no surprise she was the top genius, seeing as she just sent the young master of the Mad Saber sect flying with one move. He turned to Jiaxu and asked why he didn't go up there, since he was also a high-level fighter. Jiaxu just glanced at him and said he wouldn't bother competing, which left Tianji speechless at his arrogance. One student tried to sneak up on Beatty while she was distracted, but she nimbly dodged and sent him flying with a powerful kick. As more students gripped their weapons to charge, she realized they weren't going to stop. She frowned and decided to use her ultimate move, the Imperial Sword Decree. A tremendous force like a whirlwind pierced the sky. The crowd was stunned to see her flying. Some wondered if she had already reached the Golden Core stage, but Tianji pointed out that she was actually using using the wind from her sword to lift herself up. Jaksu agreed, noting he'd read about that specific technique in the library. Floating in midair, Badi looked down at the crowd. Zhang glared at her, but she ignored his shouting. She focused her energy and called out, "Myriad swords rise!" Thousands of shining swords appeared around her. With a cold command of all shall perish, the blades shot forward, piercing the crowd below and leaving them sprawled on the ground in fear. Murong's eyes lit up with admiration, seeing how Badi took everyone down in a single move. Ling noted in a low voice that she was incredibly strong for her level, while Xiaoyu insisted that even with those skills, she was still no match for Ling. Zhang, trembling and red-faced, stammered and asked why she had to injure him. The people around him mocked him, asking what he expected after trying to sneak a peek at her. As Badi landed back on the ground, approached her with a strange smile, commenting on how much stronger she had become. Yanli loudly announced, "The winner is Badi!" She sheathed her sword with a serious expression, but then she remembered something. Looking toward Ling from a distance, she drew her blade and pointed it right at him. "It's time to settle the score between us," she declared. Ling stepped closer, looking at her cautiously. "You just finished fighting," he said. "Don't you want to rest for a bit?" Badi replied coldly that she didn't need to. She glanced at the people lying scattered on the ground and said that dealing with them hadn't taken much effort at all. Up in the stands, the instructors watched with interest. Tianxing chuckled, noting that these two kids were likely the strongest ones there, and he was excited to see their competition play out. Lu Hong agreed and snapped his fingers, commanding a group of mechanical puppets to clear the stage by roughly grabbing the defeated contestants. Ling started to panic as he saw Badi's sharp blade near his neck. He backed away fearfully, raising his hands in surrender. "There's no need to be so hostile," he pleaded. Badi snapped at him to be quiet, determined to force him to use his full power and reveal his true identity as a demonic cultivator. Ling forced a laugh and tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding. "I don't even have any special powers, so how could I be a demonic cultivator?" he asked, sweat beading on his forehead. He tried to smile and glanced away, not daring to look her in the eye. "Even if I were, we don't have a reason to make this a life or death struggle, do we?" Badi's face darkened with anger. "No reason?" she questioned, her voice hardening as she recalled painful memories from her past. Her anger flared, and she shouted that he had no idea what she had been through. Ling anxiously backed away, sensing her aura growing stronger. Badi didn't want to talk anymore. She attacked with her ascendant sword chi, sending a powerful force from the hilt of her sword striking downward. Ling was startled by the swiftness of the attack. "Such powerful energy! I can't take this head on," he thought. He used a move called Leap of the Origin, jumping high into the air to dodge. The force followed him upward, narrowly missing him. He was relieved to have escaped, but his face remained serious. From the ground, Jaksu watched in awe. "To be able to fly so high with just leg strength, amazing," he said. Tianji added his own praise for boss Ling. Ling breathed a sigh of relief as the attack dissipated, thinking he was safe, but his relief didn't last long. Badi quickly ascended toward him. "Let's see where you can run in the air," she shouted. A beam of light from the sky infused her sword as she called out her heaven-splitting sword technique. A blinding green energy wave slammed into Ling, creating a shockwave that shook the ground. Dust and debris hung in the air as the area fell silent. Badi landed gracefully. In the stands, Lu Hong worried if the fight was getting too dangerous for the spectators, but Tianxing calmly noted that testing the newcomers was quite entertaining. As the smoke cleared, Ling appeared. Sensing him, Badi reacted instantly. Ling used a move called Empty Hand, grasping the white person, catching her blade between his palms. A blue glow emanated from his hands, astonishing the crowd. Murong was surprised he could catch such a large sword, but Xiaoyu just smiled proudly, knowing his strength was beyond imagination. Badi was furious. "You're still hiding your true face," she screamed. She leaped back into the air and used her 10,000 swords technique, sending thousands of blades hurtling toward him like a deadly rain. The shockwaves shook the ground again. When the smoke cleared, Ling was still standing. Using his empty hand technique repeatedly, he had caught every single sword. Badi shouted in frustration, unable to believe he had survived that. One observer nearby muttered that the scene felt strangely familiar. Ling slowly stood up and calmly compressed the spectral swords into a sphere. He looked at her indifferently. "You're not my match. Why not admit defeat?" he said, tossing the sphere back toward her. As the swords hit the ground, Badi's face darkened. Tears welled up in her eyes as she glared at him. "I will never admit defeat to you," she declared. 10 years ago at Imperial Sword Peak, a little girl's voice rang out. "Mother!" 5-year-old Badi ran toward her mother, clutching a small wooden sword. Her eyes were bright with excitement. "I sensed spiritual energy," she cheered. Her mother, Huayu, was so overcome with joy that she burst into tears and pulled her daughter into a huge hug. "As expected of our Badi, only 5 years old and already guiding chi into your body." Huayu gently stroked her head and told her she believed Badi would grow up to be a powerful master who would make their sect even stronger. The little girl pumped her fist in determination. "I'll do it! Badi is the best!" Suddenly a shadow fell over them. It was Bai Jian, the girl's father and the sect leader. He looked at them seriously and told his wife to stop raising their daughter that way. He argued that just sensing chi wasn't the same as actually reaching the chi refining stage, and if they kept praising her like that, she'd grow too arrogant to lead the sect one day. This started a classic argument between the couple. Waya snapped back, reminding him that when he was 5, he was still wetting the bed. She didn't see anything wrong with their daughter being a little proud of her talent. Fed up with the lecture, she pulled Baidi away, leaving her father behind. "Let's go, Baidi. It's your birthday, so I'm going to make you something delicious." Baidi looked at her mother and said she understood what her dad meant. She knew she had to be stronger to be accepted by the sect. To her mother's surprise, the little girl immediately sat down on the ground and crossed her legs to begin meditating. She was determined to reach the chi refining stage as soon as possible. Seeing his daughter's focus, Baijian was actually very proud. He hid behind a door and started crying happy tears. "Baidi, you're such a good child. Was I too harsh?" he sobbed. His wife caught him in the act and teased him for crying so loudly. He tried to save face, claiming he was just trying to maintain his dignity as a father and a leader to keep her from going astray. Wayo mocked his dignity, knowing he was just a big softy. Her husband sighed, noting that the world of cultivation is dangerous and a little hardship now would keep her safe later. He truly believed his daughter was the most talented child in the world. Baidi remained focused on her meditation, oblivious to her parents' bickering. Night fell, and the moon hung high in the sky. Baidi continued to gather spiritual energy, her body glowing softly. Her practiced sword circled her tirelessly as she pushed through her exhaustion. She kept telling herself, "Just a little more. If I get stronger, Mom and Dad won't fight anymore." Meanwhile, Waiyua headed back toward the courtyard, thinking her daughter should rest. As she arrived, she called out for Baidi, but her voice was cut short. A demonic cultivator dressed in red had appeared on the roof. Waiyua gasped, dropping the plate of food she was carrying. Baidi was so focused on her chi that she didn't notice her mother rush past her. Just as the girl felt she was on the verge of a breakthrough, a merciless blabé descended toward her. Baidi opened her eyes and saw her mother embracing her. "Mom, I did it! I broke through!" she announced happily, but her mother was busy pushing her away, screaming for her to run. Baidi was confused and kept calling out for her mom. In that life or death moment, Waiyu used her own body to take a fatal blow intended for her daughter. "Run to your father!" she cried. Smoke began to billow from the courtyard, catching the attention of Bai Jian. He rushed to the scene with his men and froze in horror. He watched as the demonic blade pierced his wife's chest while she shielded their daughter. He quickly threw out a magic chain to restrain the attacker. After subduing the demonic cultivator, he leaped onto his green sword and took flight, desperate to save what was left of his family. As soon as the words left his mouth, Baijian struck down with his one chi demon slayer slash. After finishing the threat, he rushed to his dying wife's side. "It's all right, I'm here," he whispered. Little Baidi could only whimper helplessly, "Mom." Seeing her mother covered in red, she panicked, calling out to her father over and over. Waye struggled to speak through the pain, her last words a heartbreaking apology. "I'm sorry, I didn't take good care of Baidi." As her hand fell limp, her voice faded away forever. Baidi was overcome with grief, shaking her mother and begging her to wake up. Looking at his heartbroken daughter, Baijian couldn't stop his own tears. "Baidi, today is your birthday, isn't it?" he asked through the pain. He fumbled inside his robe and tearfully pulled out the sword control seal. "From now on, without your mother here, you must use this sword to protect yourself." Snapping back to the present, she pointed her sword mercilessly at Ling, startling him. "I will absolutely not lose to a demonic cultivator," she declared. Ling tried again to reason with her. "I told you, I'm not a demonic cultivator." But Baidi was fueled by hatred. "I must use this sword to finish every demonic cultivator in the world. Why are you suddenly crying?" "I didn't pick on you," Ling said, completely bewildered by her words. She didn't listen, telling him she knew ordinary moves wouldn't work on him. She brought the sword close to her face and fell silent, thinking to herself that even though her father warned her not to use this move before reaching the golden core stage, she had no choice if she wanted to defeat a powerful enemy like him. She began to operate the ultimate sword control peak technique, her energy flowing through the blade. Up in the stands, Lu Hong and the headmaster were taken aback, recognizing it as a move meant specifically to annihilate demons. Suddenly, Baidi coughed up red, making Ling worry. "Why are you vomiting? Should I call a healer?" She coldly rejected his kindness and threw out a chain, binding him tightly. "I don't need a demonic cultivator to care about me." As soon as he was restrained, she leaped onto her flying sword and brought her blade down with everything she had. "Demon-slaying strike!" A massive boom echoed across the arena. Murong watched in shock, wondering if Ling would be okay, but Xiaoyu just watched with a bored look, knowing he wouldn't even notice an attack like that. As thick smoke covered the area, Baidi felt smug, believing that one move was enough to finish him. But then, a cough came from inside the smoke. Ling walked out looking a little dusty and scratching his head. Baidi was stunned. "Is your move finished?" he asked innocently. "I don't have a scratch." Baidi pointed her sword at him in a rage, while Ling rubbed his head. Well, there is another possibility, he suggested. Maybe I'm just not a demonic cultivator. Frustrated that her technique had failed, she bit her lip, wondering if the move was incomplete because she hadn't reached a higher level yet. Don't ignore what I'm saying, Ling yelled. But Baidi was lost in her own thoughts, convinced that if she were only stronger, she could have finished him. She was surrounded by flashes of dark light, her aura growing dangerous as she repeated her vow to finish all demonic cultivators. Suddenly, a hand appeared on her shoulder. It was the headmaster. The match ends here, he said firmly. Baidi's eyes widened in surprise. From a distance, Tianji and the headmaster's grandson watched the intervention. Tianji wondered why the match was stopped, and the grandson suggested the headmaster might actually be worried that Baidi's frightening aura would lead to someone getting finished off for real. In another part of the arena, Mo Yue was brewing a dark plan. He held out his hand, and a sinister red light appeared. It's too late to stop this now, he whispered. He pointed at Baidi, and the light shot into her body, causing a dark and ominous power to surge within her. Seeing this, the headmaster cried out in alarm. Suddenly, a massive demonic hand erupted from the ground, transforming into a giant monster. A demonic cultivator had managed to sneak in while everyone was distracted. Realizing the danger, the headmaster ordered the instructors to get the students to safety. I'll handle this myself, he declared. Baidi collapsed to the ground, feeling a strange sensation. What's happening to me? She gasped. The monster lunged toward her, and she looked up in terror. She wanted to fight back, but her body was trembling so much she couldn't move. The headmaster stepped in, explaining that she was frozen because of the shock from the demonic attack. In the distance, more demonic cultivators began to swarm the area. Mo Yue laughed, signaling his group to begin their operation. Lu Hong panicked, realizing they were being surrounded. Instructor Yanli stepped forward bravely. I'll stop them. You get the students out of here, he shouted. When Lu Hong worried about him, Yanli reminded him of his sandbag saint body and activated his diamond body defense. Tianji was impressed by the instructor's bravery, and Jiaxu noted that an instructor at the strongest academy in the world had to be capable. However, Zhao Yu noticed something was off. Yanli looked like he was about to faint while standing up. Jiaxu was baffled, wondering how the man ever passed the instructor selection process in the first place. The headmaster jumped into the fray, knocking back the monster with a powerful strike. He followed up with his burning blood divine art, sending flames toward the attackers. Tianji cheered for the formidable old man, though Jiaxu joked that his grandfather only knew how to play with fire. Despite the small victory, the headmaster was still worried about Baidi. A demonic cultivator was approaching her from behind, and it looked like it was too late. But suddenly, a figure appeared. It was Ling. Don't pick on her, he yelled, throwing a punch that sent the attacker flying. Baidi felt a mix of gratitude and confusion. Ling, why did you save me? She asked. Ling looked at her blankly. Why wouldn't I? Were they your pets or something? Baidi snapped back. Why do you see pets everywhere, you idiot? Then she softened her voice. I mean, I've been targeting you this whole time, thinking you were the enemy. Why keep saving me? Ling scratched his head sheepishly. Whether someone is a demonic cultivator or not isn't the point. What matters is what's in their heart and if they are a good person. My father told me that, and I think he's right. I think you're a good person, so you shouldn't be finished off like this. Baidi blushed at his words. Suddenly, another group of attackers advanced from behind him. Baidi screamed for him to look out. Ling turned around and called out, Immortal technique! Reincarnation of love! With one powerful move, he blasted the demonic cultivators away. The headmaster watched with interest, finding Ling to be an incredibly interesting young man, before diving back in to deal with the rest of the group. Suddenly, the enemies got back up. Ling stood his ground, but one of them charged straight at Baidi with even more power than before. Startled, Ling immediately used a transformation move. Immortal technique! White blade grip! He shouted, lifting the monster with just one hand. Baidi realized she couldn't just stand there. This can't go on. I have to join the fight too, she cried. She struck the monster down and felt a surge of relief. I did it! Ling praised her from the side. I knew it. You really are a good person. But just then, the monster released a thick spreading gas. Baidi didn't recognize the vapor, but Ling immediately realized the danger. It's poison! That monster is toxic! He yelled. Baidi quickly covered her nose, but the fog grew thicker. Ling worried that this poison was even stronger than the smoke used by Wang. He struggled to launch a counterattack, and Baidi screamed for him to be careful. Unfortunately, the poison had already entered her system, and she found she couldn't move. Ling rushed to her side and carried her away. He was confused, asking why he could still move while the poison didn't seem to affect him much. He wondered aloud if he had antibodies. Baidi was puzzled by the word, but Ling asked if she had encountered this kind of monster before. Annoyed by his questions during a crisis, she snapped, Now's not the time for that. She turned back to the demonic cultivator, worried that even if she were immune to the gas, she might not be strong enough to win. Ling was surprised that a demonic cultivator could grow to such a massive size, reminding Baidi to use her powerful demon-slaying Slash, she stammered, her hands trembling as she realized her body wasn't obeying her. Suddenly, Xiao Huo appeared with a sinister smile. Times like these, it seems I'm needed to play the hero, he smirked. He told them his previous loss was just a warm-up and that they needed him to finish the job. Elder Dan shouted a warning for him to be careful since he couldn't help this time, but Xiao Huo ignored him. Baidi, watch me now, he bragged. Baidi found his arrogance irritating. Xiao Huo charged forward, unleashing a series of elemental techniques. Wood begets fire, flame dragons embrace, he shouted, followed by a massive explosion. He went for his final move, a heaven-opening chain, but as his blade neared the monster, it wouldn't cut through. Xiao Huo was shocked as he was flung back, crashing into the ground. Elder Dan told him to rest, but he stubbornly refused, yelling that he was the chosen one and had to fight to the end. The monster launched another attack at him, and Baidi watched in disbelief. This is impossible, she thought. She realized the monster was using a technique from her own sect, the Sword Control Peak. She wondered if there was a traitor within her family. Before she could finish the thought, the monster charged at her. Ling yelled for her not to lose focus and ran to intercept the attack. Baidi couldn't believe it. Ling, you're so weak, she cried. He simply replied that he was repaying her for saving him before. Seeing the chaos, the headmaster roared in fury and leaped into the air with a giant fireball, launching his fire god descent on the group of demonic cultivators. From a distance, Sima Yue observed the scene, refusing to let the headmaster interfere with his game. Meanwhile, Baidi asked Ling how he was feeling. He weakly replied that he couldn't use his energy anymore because of the poison. Baidi asked how to cure it, and Ling mentioned that antibodies could help. Without hesitation, she said, "My blood has antibodies. Let me give you some." Ling was taken aback by how reckless she was being, but the monster was approaching again. "There's no time! Here!" she cried. Xiao Wo watched from the ground and screamed in shock as Baidi leaned in. The entire crowd erupted. "Is that a kiss from the young miss? Why would she do that?" Tianji was frantically scribbling in his notebook, claiming he had predicted her crush on Ling all along. Murong and Xiaoyu were devastated, clutching their chests and yelling for Baidi to get off of him. As the monster roared again, a massive surge of immortal energy appeared around Ling. He embraced Baidi and unleashed his most powerful attack yet. He let out a sigh and smiled. "My strength is back." After the kiss, Baidi became incredibly shy. She glanced bashfully at Ling's face from such a close distance and thought to herself, "This jerk, he's actually kind of handsome." Meanwhile, Ling, who doesn't have a romantic bone in his body, was just confused. "Why is my face suddenly so hot? Am I seriously injured?" he wondered. To hide her embarrassment, Baidi just let out a stiff cough. The awkward silence was broken by the headmaster, who sighed in relief that everyone was safe. He immediately launched an attack to push back the remaining demonic cultivators, shouting for them to pay for what they had done. However, a figure stood below with a sinister smile and a malicious gleam in his eyes. The headmaster angrily recognized him as the mastermind. He lunged at Sima Yue, but his punch went right through him. A body double, the headmaster realized in a rage. What are these demonic cultivators planning? While the headmaster was distracted, the real Sima Yue had snuck into the archives. He sneered at the foolish righteous cultivators, knowing they would never expect him to avoid a head-on fight. A red aura began to glow around him. He sent out thousands of venomous spiders to search the room, chuckling that the Academy's treasures weren't very well hidden. Soon, the spiders chirped, finding what he was looking for, an ancient scroll. "Finally!" Sima Yue laughed, but his victory was interrupted by Tian Du, the janitor, who was holding a broom and looking very annoyed. "The archives are forbidden," the old man stated. "Entering and causing damage carries a fine of 1,000 spirit stones." Sima Yue put on a mask and mocked him, asking how the once famous Tian Du had been reduced to a mere janitor. The old man snapped that it was none of his business. His job was simply to uphold the rules. He warned Sima Yue to put everything back or face a more severe penalty. Sima Yue provoked him further, asking what he would do about it. Without a word, the old man gripped his broom and charged with incredible speed. "So fast!" Sima Yue gasped. A loud bang echoed through the building, catching the headmaster's attention. "The archives! I need to check it out!" he shouted, ordering the other instructors to stay and protect the students. Xiaoyu watched him go, sensing that things were about to get chaotic again. Inside the archives, Sima Yue had been injured by the old man. He grumbled that for someone protecting the library, the janitor was causing more destruction than he was. Tian Du ignored him, adding a 10,000 spirit stone fine to cover the repairs. Sima Yue used a technique to reconnect his own arm and told the old man he still didn't understand the reason. "With demonic cultivators, there is no point in reason," Tian Du replied. He blocked Sima Yue's next attack with one hand. Sima Yue noticed a change in the old man's eyes and launched a series of strikes, but Tian Du blocked them all with his broom. The old man boasted that his power had grown far beyond Sima Yue's imagination. His eyes changed color, full of malice as he remembered how the old man had almost finished him years ago. Sima Yue revealed the dark cost of his power. He had sacrificed his own family to reach this level. He explained that although Tiandu had repelled him once before, he had managed to seize half of a secret manual, and today, he had finally taken the other half back. He mocked the old man, asking if he finally understood the gap between them. Tiandu's only response was to increase the fine to 20,000 spirit stones. Infuriated, Sima Yue lunged at him. The two exchanged blows until Sima Yue called for the old man to get serious. Tiandu gripped the hilt of his blade, residual fire, and focused his power until an aura erupted from the sheath. Sima Yue looked at the weapon with disdain. I remember breaking that blade in half. I can't believe you kept a broken shard. Tiandu stared at him down coldly. Is it really just a shard? Try it and see. He charged forward, slicing through Sima Yue's face. Sima Yue remained eerily calm, not making a sound as his body began to distort and dissolve. Thinking it was over, Tiandu looked at the lifeless remains, but suddenly Sima Yue's face began a bizarre revival, and his body dissipated into smoke. Tiandu was horrified by the demonic trickery. An eerie laugh came from behind him as Sima Yue reappeared, now looking grotesque. He sneered at the old man, admitting he wasn't easy to deal with. Tiandu gripped his blade tight and charged again, demanding to know what kind of dark magic he had been practicing all these years. Mo Yue didn't seem interested in dragging out the fight. He turned to leave, dropping a cryptic parting shot. My goal for today has already been achieved. Tiandu was shocked and refused to let him escape so easily. He focused his power, creating a blinding golden light as his face darkened with rage. I won't let you get away this time, he vowed. Seeing the old man's stubbornness, Mo Yue gave him a cold, warning look. Are you sure you want to keep chasing me? The library you love so much will be destroyed if you do. Tiandu froze, looking back at the library in its precarious state. He was filled with frustration and anger, but he didn't give up. In a final, desperate move, he slashed his own wrist with his blade, staining the metal crimson. Blood forges the blade, residual fire reforged. I will not spare you, he roared. Mo Yue just let out a disdainful laugh. Then let's see how many lives you have left. Their two forces collided in an explosion of power. Just then, the headmaster, Tian, rushed into the room. He looked anxiously at the destruction and called out for the Grandmaster. He eventually found Tiandu kneeling on the ground, coughing and covered in wounds. At your age, you're still so reckless, Tian said, rushing to support him. Tiandu gripped his broken blade tightly, his voice serious. If it weren't for protecting the academy, I would have finished that bastard. Tian was shocked by the extent of the old man's injuries and asked who could have done this. Tiandu struggled to answer, identifying the attacker as the great demonic cultivator who had invaded thousands of years ago. Tian turned pale with shock. He remembered the legends of Sima Yue, a man who had finished 100,000 people to fuel his dark arts. It had taken the entire Righteous Alliance and the lives of over 20 top-tier experts just to stop him back then. Tiandu warned him that Sima Yu wasn't just using normal demonic magic anymore. He was now using a technique to control heart demons. Tian grew even more worried, realizing the attackers outside showed those exact symptoms. He wanted to chase Sima Yu down immediately, but Tiandu stopped him. He told the headmaster not to waste his energy, as even catching him wouldn't be enough to stop him now. We need to inform the Righteous Alliance, Tiandu urged. Sima Yue is going to start a war. We need their help. As he looked at his trembling, blood-stained hand, his blade began to dissipate. He spoke with deep regret, realizing he could no longer protect the library. He suddenly worried if the heart demons had affected the students at the arena. Tian reassured him that he had suppressed them, but then his face went pale as he remembered something. Wait, the headmaster muttered before dashing off. There's still one person I haven't dealt with. Tiandu, left alone and bleeding, shouted after him in a rage. Damn it, at least get me a doctor before you leave. Back at the arena, the students were shouting indignantly. They looked at the mountain of fallen enemies and cursed the demonic cultivators, saying they all deserved to die. Ling, standing beside Beatty, listened to their angry words and began to wonder to himself, does everyone really hate them this much? Suddenly, Beatty glanced at him and said softly, Hey Ling. He looked over, feeling a bit shy, and blushed as he replied with a quiet thank you. Embarrassed by the moment, she suddenly got irritated and pointed a finger at him. I admit you saved me just now, she raised her voice, but I'm still going to investigate you. I need to know if you're really a demonic cultivator or not. Ling just felt helpless, wondering to himself, is this what they call a tsundere? Suddenly, he froze as he noticed something behind her. A blinding light erupted from behind Beatty, startling her. The headmaster, Tian, swooped down from the sky, yelling for her to get out of the way. Without a second thought, Ling rushed toward Beatty, grabbed her in a tight embrace, and fell backward to shield her. She was stunned. Why did you do that? You could have just stayed safe, she whispered. He had used his own body as a shield against the residual blast. Ling gritted his teeth and checked his back, realizing he felt fine. I think I'm okay, he said. Xiaoyu was shocked, but then she angrily punched him for making her worry so much. He gave her a gentle smile and told her not to cry. As they talked, they didn't notice two figures approaching with a dark aura. Xiaoyu, still worked up, hugged him tightly from behind, telling him not to lean in like like that if he was truly fine. Murong took the chance to run to Baidi's side, offering her a piece of meat to help her recover. As the group started to leave, the headmaster rushed forward to stop them. "Wait a moment," he said seriously, placing a hand on Ling's shoulder. "Let me examine you." Xiao Yu was annoyed by the old man's meddling and yelled at him, but Tian ignored her, staring intently at Ling with his divine eye. Suddenly, he froze in shock. "It's just as I feared. The seed of a heart demon has been planted in your body." Meanwhile, a voice echoed from the academy's first peak. The leaders were in a panic. "Sima Yue attacked the library? I can't believe that the devil is still alive." They realized he had injured Elder Wu and stolen half of a high-level secret manual. They vowed that the Alliance would have to step up to protect the library from such a dangerous threat. The headmaster raised his hand and suggested that they could combine their strength to solve the demonic cultivator problem. However, he noted with a grave expression that a more important issue had come up, which was that heart demons had appeared among the students. Thinking of the cultivator, filled with evil energy, he explained that heart demons were a collection of negative energy created when cultivators tried to push past their limits and clear out internal impurities. He added that the higher a cultivator's level, the more of these demons they would produce, and he insisted that they had to keep this a secret to keep the world stable. Duong raised his hand calmly and asked how much longer they could actually keep a secret like that hidden, especially with someone like Sima Yue appearing. A man with a long beard broke the silence and stated that the job of stopping the news from spreading would be given to Du Wang and Tian. He said the rest of them would go look for Sima Yue and the other troublemakers. Once everyone agreed, they all vanished. Elsewhere, a shadowy figure holding a communication orb whispered that the academy had been infiltrated much too easily. He questioned how it could be called the best library in the world if it was that simple to get inside. Du Wang hugged a large rock excitedly and told himself that this was the time for his own library to seize the top spot. The scene shifted back to dormitory number 8. Xiao Yu looked serious as she realized that was how heart demons were born and why they were considered the biggest taboo in their world. She doubtfully called out to Ling, only to realize he had already fallen asleep. She yelled at him in a fit of anger, telling him not to fall asleep while she was in the middle of talking. She eventually lay back down in frustration but kept a close eye on him. She told herself that it probably wasn't a good thing for Ling to know too much anyway, and slowly closed her eyes. Suddenly, Beatty sat bolt upright, her eyes filled with a dark intent. The next morning, the dormitory was peaceful as sunlight filled the room. Ling blinked his eyes open and wondered if it was morning already. He and Beatty both stretched, and he mentioned that he had slept quite well. Suddenly, they looked at each other in confusion. Beatty turned red and yelled at him, calling him a creep and asking why he was in her bed. Ling was totally surprised and apologized profusely, saying he had no idea how that had happened. People walking past the room were startled by the noise. Xiao Yu was on the floor, clinging to the bed frame and glowing with anger. She screamed at Beatty, calling her a schemer and accusing her of slandering Ling. Xiao Yu pointed at Beatty and scolded her, claiming that she was the one who crawled into Ling's bed and pushed Xiao Yu onto the floor. Beatty raised her fist and denied it, saying she would never do something like that. Xiao Yu roared back that she was definitely in her own bed in the middle of the night. Students in the hallway started whispering about the drama, with some saying they were jealous and others calling the tournament winner a playboy. Suddenly, Ling pointed at Beatty suspiciously and asked if there was another possibility, like her sleepwalking into his bed. She stammered and waved her hands in denial, her face turning red as she insisted she had never sleepwalked in her life. Xiao Yu fumed and told her not to play dumb. Beatty turned away and coughed, suggesting they just drop it since it was the first day of class and they shouldn't be late. Ling scratched his head and agreed she was right. Beatty grabbed her coat and stood by the door while Xiao Yu glared at Ling, asking if he was really going to let her get away with it. Beatty replied that she was sure the girl wasn't lying and that it wasn't good to be late. When Beatty opened the door, the people eavesdropping outside jumped in surprise. She asked them what they were doing lurking around, and they nervously chuckled, claiming they were just passing by or overheard by chance. Beatty glared at them until they ran away, shouting that class was starting and they had to go. Beatty sighed as she watched them leave. Xiao Yu walked down the street arm in arm with Ling while Beatty followed behind deep in thought. She mused that, since they were in the same class and there wasn't much to learn at the academy anyway, observing him would be much more useful. Xiao Yu bristled and hugged Ling's arm even tighter, telling her not to even dream of clinging to him. Beatty snapped back, asking what right the other had to talk to her that way, since it was obvious who was actually trying to get closer. Xiao Yu argued right back, claiming she was Ling's protector, unlike Beatty, whom he was clearly trying to keep away. Ling finally stepped in and told them both to stop arguing. They soon arrived at a building with a gleaming sign that read, Ding Hao Academy. Ling watched the two girls behind him and realized they had ended up in the same class after all. Beatty and Xiao Yu just sulked, refusing to even look at each other. Tianji entered the room and was shocked to see Ling there, asking if he was really in this class too. Ling was confused and asked if there was a problem with that. Tianji explained the hierarchy, Class A was for the elite, Class B for the good students, Class C for the average, and Class D, their class, was reserved for the weakest ones based on the exam results. Ling put a hand to his forehead in despair, feeling like his lack of talent had finally caught up to him. Xiaoyu was furious, reminding everyone that Ling had actually been the top scorer. Suddenly, a booming voice called for silence. Instructor Yanli entered with a book tucked under his arm, grumbling about noisy brats. Tianji whispered that he never would have guessed Yanli was their homeroom teacher. Yanli glared at the room, declaring that he needed to make an example of someone on the first day. He hurled his book directly at Tianji for talking, but a hand shot out and caught it. It was Ling, who flusteredly apologized, saying it was just a reflex. Yanli was stunned, thinking to himself that this kid was a walking disaster, but he softened and told Ling he understood. Tianji thanked Ling, who insisted it was just a natural reaction. A stack of books suddenly appeared on the floor, and Yanli told everyone to settle down for their first lesson. The books flew into the students' hands. Yanli explained that the book contained the introductory Qi cultivation technique of the United Righteous Alliance. He told them they had to use the illustrations to guide Qi into their bodies. A student in the back complained, saying they were all already above the Qi refining stage, so a basic technique felt beneath them. Ling pointed out that the student was actually below that stage. Suddenly, a book flew into that student's face. Yanli yelled that their previous methods couldn't compare to this one. The student stumbled back, asking Ling why he didn't block it. Ling apologized, saying he didn't react in time. Yanli explained that the righteous path was developed by the Alliance to be the safest and most stable method. He warned them that regardless of what they had learned before, they had to use this method now, or they would be expelled. Beatty smirked, thinking it would only take a minute, while Tianji thought researching the principles shouldn't be a problem. Only Ling and Xiaoyu looked at their books with hesitation. Ling started sweating and trembling, worried he wouldn't be able to do it. Meanwhile, Beatty closed her eyes and began to chant. A powerful aura surrounded her, and a blue flame appeared on her fingertips. She sent the energy flying toward a table behind Yanli, startling him. The students cheered, amazed that she mastered the technique so quickly. Xiaoyu just grumbled that she was a show-off. Yanli praised Beatty, but then told her she had to pay for the damaged desk after class. He looked at Ling and sighed, thinking it was impossible for someone without a spirit root to guide Qi in a single lesson. He didn't even notice that Beatty's flame had burned a large hole in his clothes. Other students whispered about whether they should tell him his pants were ruined. Xiaoyu told Ling not to push himself too hard, but he was determined to sense the spiritual Qi. He began to circulate his energy, and Beatty watched closely, wanting to see how he became so strong. Ling felt something changing and thought he could sense the Qi, but instead of gathering energy, he accidentally released a foul gas. An awkward silence filled the room. Ling was mortified, slamming his hand on the ground and shouting that he still couldn't sense it. Beatty asked if that was how he normally cultivated. He lunged at her, desperately asking her to teach him how she did it. Once she got him to let go, she reluctantly agreed. She told him to imagine himself as a water jug and the Qi as water flowing into it. Ling closed his eyes and tried to visualize it. He felt a reaction, but the same bad smell returned, making Beatty back away. She told him she must have taught him wrong and suggested he try another way. Ling felt helpless, wondering why he couldn't even manage a basic task. Beatty began to doubt if he could sense Qi at all, wondering how he could be so powerful if he couldn't do this. After the others finished, Yanli told them not to celebrate yet. He pulled out a golden sphere and tossed it to a student named Zhang. Zhang caught it but immediately screamed in pain. Yanli explained that this was a training tool designed by the Alliance. The more Qi you put into it, the heavier it becomes. Zhang was furious that the instructor didn't warn him. Tianji explained to Ling that this was a popular sport in the academy, similar to basketball. Yanli created 10 spheres and told the students to pour their absorbed Qi into them. Beatty found hers very light, while Tianji struggled with his. Ling, determined not to be expelled, strained every muscle to lift his sphere. Elsewhere, the headmaster was admiring himself in the mirror when a luxurious flying ship appeared in the sky. Dean of the Longtang Library arrived, claiming he was there to help with the trouble at the academy. The headmaster mocked his help, knowing Shen just wanted to learn the academy's secrets. Suddenly, a spiritual Qi sphere sent flying by Ling hurtled through the sky and crashed into the front of the academy. The impact shook the flying ship, making everyone panic and think they were under attack. Yanli yelled at Ling for destroying the classroom, while the headmaster suspected Ling was causing trouble again. Dean emerged from the smoke, but the sphere struck him right in the face, causing him to bleed. His people were horrified, accusing a demonic cultivator of attacking them. The headmaster stepped in and claimed it was just an accidental explosion of a training sphere. Shen didn't believe the flimsy excuse and challenged the headmaster to a spiritual Qi sphere duel. The headmaster agreed to the inter-academy competition and chose 5 students to participate. Tianji asked why he was chosen, since he felt his strength was lacking compared to the top scorers and he didn't want to disgrace the academy. Ling looked over at Tianji and seemed to remember his own past. He placed a hand on his friend's shoulder and encouraged him not to put himself down. He told him that as long as he tried his best, he would see results. This motivated Tianji, who started calling Ling his boss. However, Xiaohua watched from a distance with a look of disdain. He remarked that if simply trying were enough, Ling would have developed a spiritual root a long time ago. His words really hurt Ling. The headmaster coughed and stroked his beard, agreeing that Ling had a point. He noted that Tianji's special Sand Heaven's Eye ability could predict the future, which would be a massive advantage in the game. Ling shyly raised his hand because he had another question. When the headmaster told him to go ahead, Ling embarrassedly asked how the competition was actually played Tianji, and Beatty looked at him with total exasperation. Tianji explained that it was a 5-on-5 game where players controlled a spiritual energy sphere and tried to kick it into a large floating gate to score points. Ling realized it sounded like a mix of basketball and soccer. Tianji continued his explanation, noting that while players couldn't directly hurt each other, they had to use their spiritual energy to compete for the ball. After hearing this, Ling suggested that since he didn't have any energy, he probably couldn't help and offered to let the other three go without him. The headmaster was furious, reminding Ling that the entire competition was happening because he had accidentally hit the rival dean in the face with a ball earlier. The headmaster turned to the students and told them the match was scheduled for 2 days away. He urged them to use the time to practice, noting that the honor of the academy was at stake. He then pointed to a medal and promised that if they won, he would award each of them a golden Zuantian medal. Ling was puzzled until Jacksu clarified that it was the highest honor at the academy and would grant them double the cultivation resources. Ling got incredibly excited, realizing that double the resources meant a better chance for him to succeed in his training. He clenched his fists and told the team they needed to start practicing immediately. Xiaohua frowned, saying he had no interest in practicing with someone who couldn't use spiritual energy. Jacksu also declined, noting that his family owned the academy, so extra resources meant nothing to him. Beatty told them to never mind those two and suggested that she and Ling practice together. Ling happily agreed. Tianji felt a bit left behind as Beatty began to explain that the sphere could receive energy from multiple people at once, meaning the more energy they put into it, the better their advantage would be. Ling said he understood the principle even without having energy himself. She held out the sphere and challenged him to try and take it from her. Ling's expression turned serious as he lunged for the ball. However, he was a step too slow. Beatty used her magic to make the ball float out of his reach. She teased him, saying that catching a magically controlled sphere with bare hands wouldn't be easy. She secretly hoped to learn more about his unique methods while they practiced. Ling sped up, determined to be faster. Beatty was surprised by his speed and made the ball rise even higher. Just as Ling's hands drew closer, he accidentally ended up clutching Beatty instead of the ball. She dropped the sphere, her face turning bright red. Xiaohua watched from afar and was furious, calling Ling an animal. Beatty was enraged and accused Ling of doing it on purpose. He quickly bowed and apologized, saying it was an accident. Tianji watched the scene and felt a sense of romance in the air. Ling embarrassedly asked if she was hurt and even offered to rub the sore spot, which made Beatty even more flustered. She waved him off and coughed, admitting to herself that the feeling hadn't actually been that bad. Suddenly, she noticed a dark shadow in the bushes and hoped no one was ruining the mood. Xiaoyu suddenly erupted in flames, yelling at everyone to stay away from Ling. Murong tried to distract her with a chicken leg, telling her to just relax and eat. Beatty firmly stated they should move on to the next exercise. She used her sword to create a circular gate in the air and told Ling to practice his aim. He gripped the sphere, thinking that since it wasn't as heavy as he expected, he just needed to work on his accuracy. He threw the ball with a lot of force, sending it right through the goal. Beatty cheered for his accurate throw, but the sphere flew straight into a nearby room. Instructor Yanli stormed out, fuming that Ling had damaged the equipment again. He shouted that Ling wouldn't be getting any resources this month. Ling apologized quickly, but Beatty paused, wondering if she had heard a scream. The scene changed to show Dean Duwang looking very dark and brooding. The sphere was sitting right beside him. He muttered that the academy certainly had a lot of nerve. His disciple, Tu Feng, rushed in to help the old man, who was covered in blood and furious about being provoked twice in one day. Duwang wondered how a simple training ball could have injured him so badly. Tu Feng advised him to focus on preparing for the match in 3 days. Duwang agreed, noting that they were wagering the entire future of their academies on this game. Tu Feng vowed to lead their library to victory, promising his master he wouldn't let him down. 3 days later, the headmaster stood on a platform under a patched-up banner to welcome the visiting students. He called for a round of applause for Dean. Ling whispered to Beatty, asking why the dean's face looked so beat up. Beatty replied that she didn't know but wondered if he had been in a fight. Instructor Yanli sharply told them to stop whispering. Dean Duwang, whose face was covered in bruises, folded his arms and gave a very long-winded speech. He talked about strength, unity, teamwork, and the importance of a positive attitude. The students started to turn pale and yawn from the boredom. Ling whispered that even the leaders in this world gave exhausting speeches. Duwang continued for a long time, eventually telling the students they were getting worse and worse for not listening. He then pointed out that the academy's arena looked very simple. The headmaster replied that all their money went towards student resources. Duwang decided to construct a proper arena himself. He slammed his hand onto the ground and used a powerful divine art. The ground shook so much that students wondered if it was another earthquake or if he was trying to destroy the school. A massive stone arena emerged from the ground, looking like a giant flying ship. Baidi and Ling were in awe of how quickly such a huge venue was created. They were both amazed and a bit jealous of just how much spiritual energy the dean must have to pull off such a feat. Standing high above with Dean Duwang was the announcer Tianxing, who called for the players to get ready and for the spectators to take their seats. As the arena was marked out and the crowd gathered, Tianxing whispered a quick prayer for the home team to stay strong before officially introducing them. He represented the Xuantian library team Ling, Xiaohuo, Baidi, and Tianji. Ling looked determined, telling himself he had to win to secure those cultivation resources, while Xiaohuo warmed up, confidently stating he would be the star of the show. Xiaohuo even gave Ling a competitive glare, reminding him that even though they were both transmigrators, he planned to come out on top. Tianxing then introduced the Longteng library team: Wei Chu, Yingshu, Han Yun, Ling Yu, and Tu Fong. Ling Yu gave Tu Fong an encouraging pat, telling him to show everyone the true strength of their library. Tu Fong assured her they would win and looked up at Dean, silently promising to fulfill his master's long-held wish. Han Yun, seeing Tu Fong's intensity, told him not to worry since they had trained specifically for this day, while their opponents were essentially trash. Tianji roared back in anger, insisting they weren't trash and defending Ling's honor. Han Yun kept provoking him, calling Tianji a weak fat pig. Tianji was furious but held his temper for the sake of the game. Tu Fong eventually told his team to stop talking, saying they could settle things by winning. Baidi watched them, realizing that despite their arrogance, the Longteng team looked very well trained. Apparently, the Longteng players were elite talents who had never lost a single match against their peers. When Tianji asked why he was just now mentioning this, Ling admitted that no one had asked. Xiaohuo jumped in to boost morale, telling everyone not to be afraid because he was there. He drew his sword to intimidate the other team, but instructor Yanli immediately snatched it away, explaining that weapons and magical artifacts were strictly forbidden. The Longteng team laughed at the mistake, questioning how their opponents didn't even know the basic rules. Dean Duwang taunted the headmaster about his choice of students, but the headmaster told him to mind his own business and not to underestimate the kids. Meanwhile, Yanli was busy searching Ling and pulling heavy weights out of his clothes. Ling sheepishly explained it was just a habit to wear them, leaving Yanli exasperated and wondering where they were, even hiding all these iron pieces. The match officially began with a 1-hour clock and a short halftime break. Yanli tossed the spirit orb into the air and shouted for them to start. Ling leaped up with total determination, but Xiaohuo actually used his foot to pin Ling down so he could take the ball for himself. He told Ling that since he didn't have any energy, he should just stay out of the way, because they were fighting each other. Tu Fong easily stole the ball and passed it to Han Yun. Han Yun charged toward the goal, giving Tianji a sinister smile as he dashed past him. He was so fast that Tianji just stood there in a daze as Han Yun scored. Han Yun didn't miss the chance to call him a fat pig again. The score was 0-1. Dean Duwang acted very smug about the early lead while the Longteng team showered Han Yun with praise. Baidi warned her teammates that the opponents were strong and they needed to stop fighting among themselves. Ling agreed and suggested he take the lead as the main attacker while the others supported him. Baidi darted past Tu Fong, showing off her impressive speed, but Xiaohuo suddenly charged in and slammed his fist into the ground. The shockwave hit everyone, including his own teammates. Instructor Yanli immediately issued a yellow card to Xiaohuo for his malicious intent to injure others. Xiaohuo was outraged, asking whose side the instructor was on. Yanli stood his ground, saying there were no favorites on the field, only justice. While they argued, Baidi ran toward the goal and tried to throw the ball past Wei Chu. Wei Chu was busy eating a drumstick, and Baidi thought she had him beat, but he suddenly transformed into a huge beast and blocked her shot. He snatched the ball and passed it to Tu Fong, who ran like a demon toward the goal. Tianji and Jack Sue tried to defend, but Tu Fong's charge sent them both flying. He scored again, making the count 0-2. The Longteng fans went wild, and Tu Fong stood proudly, pointing at Ling and Xiaohuo. He vowed that they wouldn't let the academy score a single point. Xiaoyu was furious in the stands, threatening to go down there herself, but Murong calmed her down so Ling wouldn't get disqualified. Xiaohuo raised his hand to the instructor, asking why Wei Chu was allowed to eat and transform if tools were prohibited. The instructor simply replied that food isn't a tool, so it wasn't a violation. Xiaohuo turned purple with rage, calling it blatant cheating. In the stands, Murong regretted not bringing food for her own team. while Dean Duwang continued to insult the headmaster's students. The headmaster stayed calm, saying the match had just begun. However, the Long Teng team continued to dominate. They scored again and again, making it 0-3, then 0-6. Eventually, Wei Chu used his monstrous arm to snatch the ball and score yet again, bringing the total to 0-10 by the end of the first half. Ling's team was left exhausted, their spirits completely crushed as they headed into the break. The headmaster watched with a tense expression, wondering what the students were planning. On the other side, Duwang laughed triumphantly, mocking the headmaster because the match was already at halftime, and the students hadn't shown any real power yet. Inside the waiting room, Beatty's scolding could be heard the moment she walked in. She demanded to know what everyone was doing, pointing out that while Jack Sui's refusal to cooperate was one problem, Xiao Huo was making things even worse by causing trouble for Ling. Xiao Huo just shrugged it off, claiming that since they couldn't score anyway, he might as well have some fun. He added that he didn't want to work hard for the headmaster and felt his teammates were too weak to be worth his help. He gave Tianji a look of total disdain, which made Tianji feel so guilty that he stammered an apology for dragging everyone down. Beatty wouldn't let Xiao Huo continue putting everyone down, but Tianji was becoming so distressed that he suggested it might be better if they just withdrew from the match entirely. Outside the room, Tu Feng and Zhen Yu Ling overheard the whole argument. She sneered, telling her senior that the losers were fighting among themselves and they would win easily. Tu Feng warned her not to be careless since the match wasn't over, but secretly he looked down on them, thinking the academy was just full of overrated nobodies. He smirked, thinking he wouldn't even need to use his secret weapon. In the middle of all the arguing, Ling suddenly spoke up. When everyone turned to look at him, he scratched his head and suggested that if they couldn't cooperate as a team, they should just treat the game as an individual competition. He explained that they didn't need to coordinate, they just needed to focus on their own one-on-one battles and look for their own chances to score. The room went silent as everyone thought about his idea. Soon the break ended, and the announcer called for the second half to begin. The crowd's cheers were like a storm as both teams returned to the field. Han Yun immediately started provoking them again, asking why they hadn't surrendered yet. Tianji snapped back, telling him to just wait because Ling had a plan. Ling called out to Murong in the stands, asking her to throw down a big bag of items. As she tossed the food down, Ling moved as fast as lightning, catching every single piece cleanly. Beatty praised his impressive catch, and Tianji cheered him on. Han Yun just cracked his knuckles and told them to prepare for a real fight, promising that they would soon understand what true despair felt like. Instructor Yanli told both sides to get ready, tossed the golden ball into the air, and shouted for the second half to begin. And with that, this video ends. Like and subscribe for the next one.